Our protagonist of the story died as a nobody, but fate gave him a second chance. Reborn into the body of a nobleman, he inherited a crumbling territory plagued by corruption, starvation, and enemies waiting to strike. Armed with the knowledge of his past life, he's building an army, industrializing his land, and forging a kingdom that will defy the odds. The manhwa starts with a doctor urgently calling out for assistance, instructing the team to place the patient on a ventilator. Meanwhile, Yan gasped, his chest heaving as his heart pounded erratically, on the verge of giving out. Yan, a dedicated industrial mechanical designer for the past 20 years, found himself teetering on the brink of life and death. His tireless work had yielded little more than disappointment and a pervasive loneliness. Now, his relentless drive had finally caught up with him, fracturing his mental health and leaving him in this precarious state. From the moment of his birth, Yan's life had been marked by tragedy. A car accident had claimed his parents, leaving him to navigate the world as an orphan. Despite his hardships, Yan pressed on, clinging to the hope that life would one day acknowledge his efforts and deem him successful. That day, however, never came. After graduating, he secured a low-paying job that barely kept him afloat for 2 decades. His personal life was just as bleak. He had spent his entire life alone, never once experiencing the intimacy of even holding someone's hand. And now, it seemed, his solitary journey was coming to an end. "Yan, can you hear me?" His closest friend's voice broke through the chaos, filled with worry as they tried to pull him back from the brink. Yet, Yan couldn't help but question the worth of a life like his. Was there any meaning to such an existence? As exhaustion overwhelmed him, he thought, maybe I'll just take a little nap. When Yan opened his eyes, the scene around him was utterly unfamiliar. He found himself in a room of unparalleled luxury, adorned with silk curtains and sparkling crystal lights. The opulence of the setting made him panic momentarily, thinking he had somehow burned through all his savings on an extravagant hospital room. Then, a notification appeared before him. "Welcome to the magical continent of Elda." The realization hit him like a jolt. Could this be one of those isekai scenarios straight out of fiction? In this strange new land, Yan discovered he was now known as Ren. Bewildered, he tried to make sense of his circumstances, but answers were elusive. A week passed in this fantastical world. Ren found himself living a dreamlike life, attended to by servants at every turn. Slowly, he pieced together the truth of his situation. He had indeed died and somehow been reincarnated in the body of Ren Edgar, the third son of the Duke of the Allen Edgar family. Ren had an older sister and brother, both of whom had cared for him deeply since his childhood. "Little brother, eat this. You're growing up and shouldn't go hungry," his sister insisted, placing a lavish spread before him. His brother handed him a sparkling vial, explaining, "This is magic water. It's said to enhance magical power, and I got it at a high price." Even his mother contributed to this nurturing atmosphere, gifting him a new shirt she had made herself and urging him to try it on. As the youngest and most pampered member of the family, Ren lived a life of unparalleled comfort. But as he reveled in this newfound luxury, he couldn't help but feel like a stranger in this world, questioning why he had been granted such blessings. To soothe his doubts, he reasoned that perhaps this was compensation for the hardships he endured in his previous life. The world of Elda was a marvel, where magic powered all aspects of infrastructure. The Corial Empire, the continent's largest human nation, was a melting pot of various races, including elves and dwarves. The Edgar family's influence was vast, overseeing a territory of 300,000 square kilometers. Their domain boasted fertile fields, a grand castle, and a population of over 1 million. As a noble, Ren had everything he could ever want, from fine clothing to a personal maid. Yet every time he looked into the mirror, he saw Yan's face staring back at him, a haunting reminder of his past life. One day, Ren's introspection was interrupted by Leah, a beautiful and cheerful maid, who informed him that his father wanted to see him. She led him to the study, where his father, Aldine, was reviewing reports from across their lands. Ren greeted him with the practiced courtesy of a noble, awaiting his father's words. Aldine regarded his son with a serious expression, his tone carrying weight as he asked, "Do you know why I called for you?" The gravity of the moment made Ren uneasy, but he softly replied, "No, I don't, father." The Duke leaned back in his chair, his stern demeanor easing slightly. "Ren, you've reached the age to manage your own territory. Have you considered where you would like it to be?" The question left Ren stunned. His surprise turned into confusion as he hesitantly inquired about inheriting land. Aldine sighed at his son's naivety, explaining that it was customary for a noble of Ren's age to take charge of a territory. Rising from his chair, the Duke approached a large map mounted on the wall. "The land you'll oversee is in the northwest. It's relatively safe, but the lack of mages has made food supply a persistent issue." His tone grew more solemn as he continued. "While our territory is stable for now, the future of the Corial Empire is uncertain." Ren silently agreed with his father's assessment. The royal family's decline and the decaying political system had led to a fractured empire. Lords constantly clashed, with hidden rivalries and schemes weaving a dangerous web of competition that only grew more tangled with time. Since his rebirth, Ren experienced care and affection he had never known before. This newfound love made him determined to protect those who genuinely cared for him. Observing his son deep in thought, Aldine grew concerned, questioning whether he was placing too much responsibility on Ren. In an attempt to ease the tension, he reassured his son that he wasn't alone. Aldine reminded Ren that he had his older brother, his sister, and his father to support him. Ren, however, appeared to have an idea. He looked at his father with a newfound determination. With a serious tone, he asked if solving the food supply issue would make their territory safer. Aldine smiled at Ren's enthusiasm, but viewed his son's approach as overly simplistic. He explained that resolving the food problem required more than passion. It demanded meticulous planning and gradual implementation. But Ren wasn't thinking simplistically. He was drawing from the accumulated knowledge of humanity, forged through countless industrial revolutions. With unwavering confidence, he boldly declared that he would take on the responsibility of addressing the food crisis. Ren's journey to his new domain began. Island City, the remote territory assigned to him, was a land rich in potential but fraught with challenges. To the north, it bordered the territory of Grand Duke Ryan, a sworn adversary. To the west lay the enigmatic lands of the elves, and to the south stretched the vast, uncharted ocean. The territory's strategic location had made it a frequent battleground, leaving its fertile lands barren, its population sparse, and its resources depleted. As the carriage carried him toward Island City, Ren immersed himself in the documents detailing his new domain. Leah, his loyal companion, watched him intently, concern etched on her face. Ren knew that revitalizing the territory required increasing its population, as a strong workforce was the backbone of any industrial revolution. He understood the enormity of the challenge but believed his efforts would succeed. Ren wasn't starting from scratch. Among his assets was a special skill granted to him by the system, Human Resource Scan. This ability allowed him to assess and identify talented individuals with ease. Having tested the skill on his family, Ren had established a clear understanding of the world's talent standards. His first priority upon arriving in Island City was clear: find extraordinary individuals who could aid in restoring the territory. Meanwhile, Leah recalled the Duke's instructions to her: support Ren and ensure he didn't create chaos in the region. Silently, she prayed that Ren wouldn't make a mess of things. In Island City, the city lord's residence was abuzz with tension. A man, visibly anxious, reported that the Duke's youngest son would arrive soon. He suggested taking preemptive action. However, the masked man seated across from him dismissed the concern with a cold, measured response. He instructed them to await further orders and not to touch Ren for now. His calm demeanor masked simmering anger as he spoke of making Aldine pay for past transgressions. The blonde-haired man nearby was less composed. Nervously, he fretted over his falsified financial records and embezzled taxes. However, the masked man laughed dismissively, deriding Ren as an ignorant playboy who would never notice such details. All they needed to do was hand him some irrelevant documents upon his arrival. The blonde-haired man reluctantly obeyed and left to prepare for Ren's reception. As Ren's carriage approached the outskirts of Island City, he peered out at the barren fields and abandoned farmlands. His expression turned serious as he surveyed the scene. He requested a map from Leah and examined the surrounding area meticulously. His gaze lingered on the river to the west and the harbor to the south. A sudden idea struck him. Dredging the river and building a canal to connect it to the sea could breathe new life into the land. Ren's thoughts were interrupted by a desperate cry. A young girl knelt in the dirt, clutching the leg of a man, likely her father, who seemed intent on heading to a gambling den. The girl pleaded tearfully, begging him not to gamble away their remaining money, which was meant for her mother's treatment. Her voice trembled as she explained that losing the money would doom her ailing mother. The man, consumed by his greed, roared at the girl to let go. His confidence in his luck blinded him to her desperation. When she refused to release him, he raised his hand in anger, intending to strike her. Before the blow could land, Ren intervened. With a swift punch, he sent the man sprawling to the ground. Fury burned in Ren's eyes, though he winced immediately. This was, after all, the first time he had ever thrown a punch. Leah rushed to Ren's side, her face filled with concern. She scolded him gently, remarking that next time he planned to hit someone, he should at least warn her so she could bring protective gear. Ren chuckled, brushing off her concern. He explained that the punch had been a spur-of-the-moment decision, leaving no time for preparation. As he spoke, he strode toward the man sprawled on the ground, instructing Leah to check on the girl while he dealt with the gambler. The man, still clutching his face, stared up at Ren in shock. Ren's gaze was sharp and filled with contempt. He berated the man for taking money meant for his family and gambling it away, even resorting to hitting his own daughter. The gambler scowled and tried to defend himself, asking who Ren was to meddle in his affairs. Ren stepped closer, his presence imposing. He warned the man that it didn't matter who he was. If he ever caught him near a gambling den again, the consequences would be severe. Ren's cold tone and threatening demeanor made the man pale with fear. Stammering, the gambler promised to stay away from gambling dens and quickly fled the scene. Feeling satisfied with his handling of the situation, Ren turned back to the girl, who stood there frozen in shock. Concerned, he asked if she was all right and activated his system to check her condition. The girl, named Lillian, bowed her head in gratitude, thanking Ren profusely. She explained how losing the money would have meant losing the chance to save her mother's life. As Ren studied the system screen, he was intrigued to see her stats. While most were ordinary, one unique attribute stood out: her potential in agriculture and harvesting. Recognizing this hidden talent, Ren decided on the spot to recruit her for his plans to restore the land. Ren smiled warmly at her, noting that she was likely heading into the city to find a doctor for her mother. He suggested she join his group, as they were also traveling there. Lillian hesitated, concerned about dirtying his carriage, but Ren reassured her with a calm smile. He explained that a carriage was just a vehicle, merely planks of wood pieced together. There was no such thing as clean or dirty when it came to transportation. Besides, he had a few questions for her. Suddenly, Ren's tone grew serious. He questioned why a gambling den existed in such a poverty-stricken area. He recalled the region's recent hardships. Last fall, soldiers sent by Grand Duke Ryan had attacked, leading to heavy casualties. Early in the spring, devastating floods had ravaged the land, leaving its people struggling to survive. The streets of Island City bore the scars of these events, with beggars lining the roads and despair visible everywhere. Walking through the ruined streets, Ren decided it was essential to conduct a full population census to assess the remaining productive workforce. First, however, he planned to visit the city lord's manor to review the reserve funds and determine what could be allocated for infrastructure improvements. Ren asked Lillian for the manor's location, but before she could answer, a shout interrupted their conversation. A blonde-haired man on horseback barreled down the street, shouting for people to move out of his way. The man seemed indifferent to the chaos he caused, his actions reckless and dangerous. Leah reacted swiftly, pulling Ren aside just in time to avoid the galloping horse. The rider disappeared into the distance, unconcerned about the commotion he had left behind. Leah, however, glared after him furiously. To her, anyone who dared harm Ren deserved the harshest punishment. As Leah's grip tightened protectively around Ren, he struggled to breathe and finally managed to get her attention. She quickly released him, apologizing and asking if he was hurt. Ren reassured her with a smile, expressing his gratitude for her quick actions. Turning serious again, Ren asked Lillian if she recognized the rider. Trembling, she explained that he was the young master of the Elwyn family, whose wealth stemmed from owning all the gambling dens in Island City. Ren's expression shifted to one of interest. If the Elwyn family was wealthy, it presented an opportunity to fund his plans. He asked Lillian to take him to one of the gambling dens, but she tried to dissuade him, worried that he would lose all his money. Ren, however, remained confident. He assured her that the gambling den wouldn't be taking anything from him. Watching his determined figure, Lillian couldn't help but wonder who this noble young man truly was. Soon, Ren arrived at the gambling den. The building stood out starkly from the surrounding structures, its grandeur flaunting the disparity between wealth and poverty. Guards were posted at the entrance, but Ren approached without hesitation. A sly smile crossed his face as he thought of his plans. He would take everything from this place to fund his industrial projects. Inside, the den was a chaotic mix of noise and desperation. Gamblers pleaded for loans, certain they could win back their losses in the next round. Others celebrated fleeting victories or lamented crushing defeats. Ren observed the scene with a critical eye. As long as this gambling den existed, he realized, the people of Island City would never have the motivation to work diligently. Leah leaned close to Ren, her voice low and cautious as she informed him that their soldiers had surrounded the gambling den. She asked if they should proceed. Ren, maintaining his calm demeanor, told her to wait. He wanted to capture an even bigger target. As he stood there, a staff member from the gambling den approached him with a polite smile and asked what game the young master would like to play. Ren smiled back, feigning inexperience, and admitted that he wasn't very familiar with gambling but wanted to try a few rounds. He asked the staff member to recommend a simple game. Sensing an easy mark, the attendant suggested a dice game and handed Ren 2 complimentary chips, claiming they were free for him to try his luck. Ren accepted them, seemingly pleased. The game began as Ren casually tossed the 2 chips onto the small betting slot. Watching this, the 2 casino staff members exchanged smug glances, confident in their scheme. The dice rolled quickly, landing on 6 and 6. Big. The attendant feigned sympathy, consoling Ren by saying he had been close to winning. Ren played his part perfectly, expressing surprise at how quickly the game ended. He remarked that it wasn't very entertaining and said he felt hungry, turning to leave. The attendant, however, stepped in front of him, blocking his way. His polite demeanor dropped, replaced with a mocking tone as he demanded payment for the chips Ren had used. Ren frowned, feigning confusion. He asked when he had agreed to owe anything. The attendant sneered and explained that the chips were not gifts, but loans. He added that each chip was worth 100 gold coins, and with processing fees and interest, Ren now owed 250 gold coins. Smirking, the attendant suggested that if Ren couldn't pay, he could leave his maid as collateral. Lillian, outraged by the scam, quickly spoke up. She accused the attendant of lying and explained to Ren that the chips were worth no more than a silver coin each. The attendant, furious at Lillian for exposing his trick, shouted for the guards to beat her. Before he could finish his command, Ren struck him with a powerful punch, sending the man flying backward and crashing into a nearby table. Adjusting his clothes calmly, Ren remarked that someone like the attendant had no authority to speak here. The casino erupted into chaos as gamblers scrambled to grab the chips that scattered across the floor. Ren sighed as he watched them, muttering that none of these people were of any use. Suddenly, a commanding voice echoed through the room, demanding to know who was causing trouble. The speaker was the same man Ren had encountered on horseback earlier. Ren's lips curled into a smile. He had finally caught the bigger fish. The man's arrival silenced the chaos instantly. He glared at the room with displeasure before ordering his guards to teach the troublemakers a lesson. Without hesitation, the guards began mercilessly beating those nearby, ignoring their cries for mercy. The remaining crowd watched in fear, too scared to intervene. The young master of the Elwyn family sneered at the onlookers, threatening them to behave or face the same fate. Lillian, clutching Leah's arm, whispered that it was all her fault. She blamed herself for leading them to the den and felt ashamed for putting Ren and Leah in such a position. She recalled how Ren had taken her mother to the hospital, personally ensuring she received treatment and promising to cover the costs. That memory filled her with determination. Summoning her courage, Lillian stepped forward and declared that she would not allow them to scam her brother. Her boldness caught everyone's attention, though most were too afraid to react. Murmurs spread through the crowd, questioning who she was and how she dared challenge someone like the young master of the Elwyn family. Weo, the young master, stared at her coldly, enraged by her defiance. Lillian stood her ground, accusing him of using the casino to exploit and destroy families. She refused to let him bully Ren and Leah, calling them good people who didn't deserve such treatment. Weo, seething with anger, lunged at her. Despite her fear, Lillian refused to move, shielding Ren with her small frame. Before Weo could harm her, Ren intercepted the attack, grabbing his arm. Ren then activated his system skill to assess Weo's stats. The results revealed low attributes, only 5 loyalty points, and a personality marked by cruelty and bloodlust. Ren recognized the Elwyn family as a potential threat, one capable of betrayal at any moment. Blocked, Weo glared at Ren and accused him of not respecting the rules of the casino. Ren calmly released his grip and responded that he understood the rules perfectly. In this world, power dictated everything, and the strong made the rules. Weo sneered arrogantly, fully convinced that he was the strongest in the city. He questioned why Ren still dared to oppose him, asking if Ren even knew who he was. Ren's expression remained steady as he responded confidently, asserting that he didn't need to know who Weo was. The only thing that mattered was his own strength, as his fist was bigger and his word was the law. With that, he clapped his hands, signaling his soldiers to storm into the casino. The scene then shifted to a grand banquet held in Ren's honor, gathering the city's most prominent and influential figures, each with their own hidden agendas. Among the attendees was Lucas, the head of a prestigious family. Lucas planned to collaborate with the city lord during this banquet to teach Ren a lesson. He had intended to use Weo to establish a connection with Ren that he could later manipulate, but he was puzzled by Weo's absence. Frustrated, he realized he couldn't rely solely on the city lord's incompetence and would need to adapt his plans. As the banquet hall buzzed with murmurs, a loud voice suddenly announced Ren's arrival. The atmosphere shifted instantly, growing tense and silent as Ren entered. His presence commanded attention, and the guests quickly adjusted their demeanors. The head of the Raven family hurried forward, introducing himself and presenting a gift to Ren. Another guest, the head of the Jose family, eagerly introduced his daughter, hoping to curry favor. However, Ren's sharp expression silenced the room as he instructed everyone to quiet down. With everyone present, Ren declared that it was time to officially begin. He gestured for his attendants to bring in a large blueprint, a peculiar object that immediately caught everyone's attention. Pointing to the blueprint, Ren explained that it was a design for a dam that he had sketched earlier that afternoon. He mentioned that he would enlist skilled craftsmen during its construction to confirm the finer details. The room was filled with whispers as the attendees exchanged confused glances. Someone asked aloud what a dam was, speculating whether it was a tool for fishing. Ren quickly called for silence and instructed Leah to display a map of the region. With the room now quiet, he began his presentation. Ren explained that during his survey of Island City earlier that day, he had identified the root cause of the city's annual flooding, a poorly managed canal in the far north. By building a dam at this location, they could control water flow, using it to irrigate fields during the dry season and releasing excess water during the rainy season to prevent floods. Lucas, listening intently, couldn't help but be impressed by the ingenuity of the plan. He realized that if the dam was successfully built, it would significantly boost the city's food production. For the first time, he acknowledged that Ren possessed a sharp and innovative mind. An older man in the audience asked how the project concerned them, prompting Ren to explain calmly that he needed their investments to fund the dam's construction. This statement shocked the crowd, sparking a wave of grumbling. Many protested, claiming they were too poor to contribute. Lucas remained silent, privately thinking that while Ren was intelligent, he was also naive to expect these opportunists to willingly invest. Ren, however, wasn't as naive as they assumed. Smiling, he reminded them there was no need to feign poverty. He had a plan to make everyone a fortune. Ren revealed that earlier that afternoon, he had seized a casino and confiscated nearly 50,000 gold coins. He hinted that there were several more casinos in Island City ripe for similar action. The revelation left the attendees stunned. Their minds raced as they processed the implications. Some murmured anxiously, wondering if their shares in the casino profits were now lost. Others hoped the seized casino wasn't one of their investments. It became clear that the largest casino in Island City belonged to Lord Andrine, making it likely that Ren had provoked a powerful enemy. Lucas, his calm facade masking inner fury, stepped forward to confront Ren. He accused Ren of acting unlawfully by dismantling a legitimate business without authorization. Lucas emphasized that the laws of the Corial Empire could not be violated and warned Ren of the consequences. Others quickly chimed in, echoing Lucas's words. They accused Ren of overstepping his authority and pointed out that casinos were legitimate businesses. The crowd grew more emboldened, rallying behind Lucas's objections. Ren, unfazed by their protests, remained calm. He addressed the room, noting that when he asked for investments, they claimed to be poor, but now that he offered an opportunity for profit, they were suddenly concerned. He pointed out that most of them were complicit in the casino operations and warned them that this was their last chance to save their reputations, or he would intervene personally. At this, Ren's soldiers stepped forward, their presence a stark reminder of Ren's authority. Lucas, speaking for the group, insisted that the Grand Duke would never condone Ren's reckless actions. Others chimed in, pleading with Ren to reconsider his approach and urging him to act with restraint. Ren smiled, his plan unfolding perfectly. With an air of authority, he announced that he would gladly discuss the law with them. His voice was calm but commanding as he gave the order to bring in those who would help clarify the situation. The crowd fell silent, their unease palpable, as they awaited what Ren had planned next. At Ren's command, 2 men captured at the casino were brought into the room. Lucas, seated among the nobles, was immediately struck by their presence. These 2 were always by Weio's side, and their unexpected appearance left Lucas uneasy. He began to suspect that something must have happened to his son. The men were brought in, bound and gagged, unable to speak. Ren, maintaining his calm demeanor, turned to Lucas and asked if he recognized them. Lucas, keeping his expression neutral, denied any knowledge of the men and asked what Ren meant by the question. Ren smiled lightly, reassuring Lucas not to be so tense. He explained that it wasn't a big deal. These 2 men had simply tried to assassinate him the previous day. Glancing pointedly at Lucas, Ren added that the men had claimed to control the city of Islan, and even hinted at having a powerful backer. Lucas's expression darkened, though he worked to maintain his composure. Beads of sweat formed on his brow as he attempted to hide his unease. Ren ordered his soldiers to untie the 2 men, suggesting they let the party guests see if anyone recognized them. The nobles in the room exchanged uneasy glances. Many of them instantly identified the men as Weio's attendants. Fear gripped the room as the implications of Ren's words became clear. Lucas, realizing the gravity of the situation, acted without hesitation. He grabbed a dagger from the table and lunged at the 2 men with a fury that shocked the onlookers. He denounced them as wretched commoners who dared to attack the Duke's son and swiftly killed them both. Blood pooled on the floor, and the room fell silent as the other nobles watched in stunned horror, too afraid to intervene. Standing over the bodies, Lucas turned to Ren with a feigned look of shame. He apologized profusely, claiming that he had acted out of anger upon hearing about the assassination attempt. He begged for Ren's forgiveness. Ren, who had anticipated this move, smiled knowingly. He praised Lucas for his sense of justice, commending him as a noble who acted decisively. Lucas, masking his relief, thanked Ren for the compliment, stating that he had only done what was necessary. But Ren wasn't finished. Calmly, he ordered his soldiers to bring out the mastermind behind the events to see if there were any other nobles in the room as principled as Lucas. The command made Lucas tense. His son, Weio, was quickly dragged into the room. As soon as he entered, Weio, completely unaware of the situation, shouted angrily at the soldiers to untie him. He boasted about his father's influence, threatening that everyone present would pay once he was free. Lucas's expression crumbled at the sight of his son. Any arrogance in his demeanor vanished as he realized why Weio had been absent from the banquet. Weio, seeing his 2 attendants lying lifeless on the floor, erupted with rage. He insulted Ren, threatening him with torture once he was released. Ren, unfazed by the outburst, chuckled. He sarcastically noted that Weio not only wanted to kill him, but also seemed eager to inflict as much suffering as possible. Weio continued his tirade, boasting that no one in Islan dared to oppose him, and that Ren's death was inevitable. Ren turned to Lucas, asking if he agreed with his son's claims. Weio, still oblivious to Ren's identity, laughed and mocked him further. Just as Weio was about to reveal Lucas's identity, his father cut him off sharply. Lucas, now desperate, scolded Weio, calling him a disobedient son. He ordered Weio to kneel before Ren, but when his son hesitated, Lucas forced him down. Falling to his knees alongside his son, Lucas pleaded for Ren's mercy. He begged for forgiveness, offering all his possessions in exchange for sparing Weio's life. It was only then that Weio realized his mistake. He recalled his father's instructions to befriend the Duke's son, and fear crept into his eyes as he finally understood Ren's true identity. Stammering, Weio apologized and swore never to act so foolishly again. Ren's expression remained cold as he told Weio that his soldiers and authority were proof enough of his status. Lucas joined in, swearing that the Elwyn family would serve Ren loyally and even offering to surrender all their illegally gained assets. Ren, unmoved, informed Lucas that he would accept his offer to turn over the assets. He assured him that if he complied, his family would remain safe. Relieved, Lucas expressed his gratitude. However, as he glanced at the city lord, he realized his influence was now diminished. Knowing he had little choice, Lucas whispered to Ren about a plot against the Duke. He revealed that Lord Eldry had been colluding with outside enemies to betray the city. The revelation shocked the room, and all eyes turned to Eldry, who stood frozen with fear. Lucas was about to elaborate, but Ren interrupted him sharply. He accused Lucas of slandering Eldry and declared that he had been lenient enough. Ren ordered his guards to drag Lucas and Weio out of the room for execution. Lucas was stunned and terrified, unable to understand Ren's sudden shift in behavior. Meanwhile, Eldry, relieved by Ren's response, stepped forward to pledge his loyalty. He praised Ren for his wisdom and promised unwavering support. Ren, smiling, assured Eldry that he trusted him completely. However, Ren secretly used his system to analyze Eldry's attributes. Among ordinary stats, he found the trait greed and noted a loyalty level of only 15. Ren decided that Eldry, like Lucas, was destined to be eliminated. For now, however, he would use Eldry's resources to further his plans. After the banquet ended, Ren continued working late into the night. The nobles had contributed over 100,000 gold coins, an amount equivalent to 2 years of taxes collected from the city of Islan. Yet the sum didn't satisfy him. As Ren focused on his work, Leah entered the room carrying a cup of tea. She placed it on the desk and observed the displeasure in his expression. Ren took the tea and commented bitterly, questioning whether Leah realized just how wealthy the nobles truly were. Leah didn't respond to his question. Instead, she brought up a more pressing concern. She asked what Ren planned to do about Lucas's revelation at the party. If the city lord, Eldry, truly intended to betray them, it would put Ren in grave danger. Ren reassured her, asking her to stay calm. He admitted that he was certain of Eldry's betrayal, but explained that it wasn't the right time to confront him. When Leia asked why, Ren stretched and stood, answering that Eldry's full network of influence in Islan was still a mystery. Acting prematurely would only lead to unnecessary chaos. For now, it was best to let Eldry believe that Ren was an ignorant young lord, unaware of the threats surrounding him. The following morning, Eldry met with Guildmaster Malcolm at the Mages Guild. He handed Malcolm a piece of paper, and after reading it, the Guildmaster's face twisted with fury. Malcolm slammed the paper down, calling the situation absurd. Eldry, calm and calculating, asked him not to overreact. He dismissed Ren as a young and overeager noble desperate to prove himself to the Grand Duke. Malcolm, however, wasn't appeased. His irritation grew as he reminded Eldry that even the Grand Duke spoke respectfully to the Mages Guild. Eldry, satisfied with Malcolm's anger, inwardly celebrated. He believed Ren had handed him the perfect opportunity to win over the guild, something he previously lacked the means to accomplish. As Malcolm stormed off with the paper in hand, swearing to demand an explanation from Ren, Eldry silently rejoiced, confident that Ren would soon find himself isolated. Meanwhile, Ren was in his study, sketching plans for a hydraulic construction project. The work reminded him of the hardships he had endured in his previous life. Leah entered to inform him of an unexpected visitor. Guildmaster Malcolm had arrived and was demanding to see him. Surprised, Ren immediately made his way to the parlor to meet him. The moment Ren entered, Malcolm confronted him with anger. He slammed a recruitment notice onto the table, accusing Ren of insulting the Mages Guild. Ren, bewildered, asked for clarification. Malcolm pointed to the notice, which stated that no mages, the disabled, or the elderly would be hired for Ren's project. He demanded to know why Ren had issued such a notice. Ren examined the paper and calmly explained that it was related to the dam construction project. He saw no connection between the notice and any insult to the guild. Malcolm disagreed, accusing Ren of blatant provocation. He argued that by excluding mages, Ren was disrespecting the guild and its members. Ren was taken aback, surprised that mages were competing for manual labor jobs. Still fuming, Malcolm warned Ren that if no reasonable explanation was provided, all mages in the guild would refuse to serve him. Ren frowned and silently called out to his system to analyze Malcolm's stats. The system revealed Malcolm's loyalty level was 82, and his personality was described as inquisitive and straightforward. Ren concluded that Malcolm had been manipulated. Smiling, Ren patiently explained his reasoning. He outlined 3 key points. First, mages had limited mana and could only perform a small amount of work each day, making them unsuitable for large-scale construction. Second, their salaries were equivalent to those of 10 common laborers, making them cost-prohibitive. Third, as a noble, it was Ren's duty to prioritize the welfare of ordinary people who lacked the guild's support. Malcolm, however, remained unconvinced. He argued that magic was revered in their world, and those without magical talent deserved to be trampled beneath the feet of mages. Ren, irritated by this perspective, admitted that it might reflect reality, but firmly stated that he intended to change it. He declared that starting in Iceland, he would prove that mages were no different from ordinary humans. Malcolm, deeply insulted, issued an ultimatum. He demanded Ren retract his statement or face the consequences of angering the Mages Guild. Ren's expression turned cold as he reminded Malcolm to watch his tone. Leah, standing nearby, pressed a knife to Malcolm's throat, her eyes filled with menace. Malcolm froze in terror as Ren calmly pointed out that there was indeed a law allowing a noble's maid to execute someone for disrespect. Ren suggested testing the law with a small cut to see which side the court would favor. Trembling, Malcolm quickly apologized, admitting his mistake and begging for forgiveness. Ren, noting that Malcolm's loyalty hadn't decreased, realized the guildmaster had acted out of ignorance rather than malice. Deciding not to escalate the situation, Ren instructed Leah to escort Malcolm out. Malcolm thanked Ren and hurriedly left. As he departed, the system notified Ren that a beginner task had been completed. He had used the investigation function on 10 individuals. A reward was issued, and a new task appeared: train 5 characters with high stats. Pleased with his progress, Ren decided to review his rewards later. Outside the estate, Eldry waited for Malcolm. The moment he saw the guildmaster, he rushed over, feigning concern. He asked how the meeting had gone. Malcolm, still humiliated, sighed and admitted that Ren had refused to listen and had even thrown him out. Eldry, frustrated but quick to recover, devised another plan. He assured Malcolm that he had a solution, one that would not only make Ren change his mind, but also force him to revere the Mages Guild. After his initial plan failed, Eldry quickly devised another approach. He encouraged Malcolm to manipulate the townsfolk into refusing to work for Ren, believing that such resistance would force Ren to seek Malcolm's assistance. However, Malcolm immediately rejected the idea, pointing out that Ren had offered excellent working conditions that the townsfolk were unlikely to refuse. Undeterred, Eldry suggested a different strategy. He proposed that if those who worked for Ren were shown to be lazy and idle, Ren would eventually grow disillusioned with the commoners. Malcolm dismissed the suggestion, explaining that his dissatisfaction stemmed solely from Ren's refusal to hire mages, not from any grievance with the commoners. He was reluctant to act against Ren over such a matter. Eldry persisted, urging Malcolm to reconsider. He argued that the commoners' inherent laziness was the reason they were starving and struggling to survive. If the land couldn't yield crops, Eldry reasoned, why didn't they take initiative and hunt for food? He claimed that people as idle as the commoners could never genuinely work hard for Ren. Reluctantly, Malcolm agreed to give the plan a try. Meanwhile, Ren's recruitment notice was posted in the town center, quickly attracting a crowd. The townsfolk gathered to read the announcement, intrigued by the new lord's plans to build something and his call for workers. As they scanned the notice, they were stunned. The job offered an 8-hour workday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 3 daily meals, and a wage of 10 coins per day. A young man in the crowd voiced his skepticism, questioning why the new lord was being so generous. Others shared his doubt, suspecting it might be a scam. Many recalled how nobles had deceived them in the past. Some argued that working under such terms could be dangerous, and might even cost them their lives. At that moment, Lillian stepped forward, her voice strong and determined. She defended Ren, stating that he had promised to improve everyone's lives. Her sincerity was met with laughter and ridicule. The crowd dismissed her words as naive, mocking her for trusting a noble. Even Lillian's father joined in, accusing her of being bewitched by Ren. Ignoring her father's remarks and the jeers of the townsfolk, Lillian announced her intention to register for the dam project. The recruiter, a young man overseeing the registration process, remained calm despite the crowd's skepticism. Turning to Lillian's father, he invited him to work on the dam, but stated that Lillian herself could not participate. Confused, Lillian demanded to know why she was being excluded, insisting she was healthy and capable. The recruiter explained that Ren had set strict rules prohibiting anyone under the age of 18 from working. He emphasized that hiring underage workers without Ren's approval would result in severe punishment. Handing Lillian's father a registration form, he reiterated the terms: 3 meals a day, an 8-hour workday, and a wage of 10 coins per day. If there were no further issues, he invited Lillian's father to sign the form and begin work the following day. Though slightly disappointed, Lillian encouraged her father to do his best and avoid any laziness. Her father, smiling warmly, patted her head and reassured her. He vowed not to gamble again and promised not to disappoint Ren. He also reminded Lillian to stay home the next day and take care of her mother, whose illness made it impossible for her to perform strenuous tasks. Before Lillian and her father could leave, the recruiter called out, asking them to return. Surprised, Lillian's father stopped and asked if there was a problem. The recruiter, looking concerned, mentioned that he had overheard the father say his wife was gravely ill. Lillian's father quickly clarified that his wife was indeed unable to work due to her condition. The recruiter smiled kindly and reassured him that he wasn't asking her to work. He explained that Ren had arranged for workers' families to stay in dormitories provided for the duration of the project. Seeing the father's confusion, the recruiter clarified that the dormitories were temporary housing units for families participating in the dam's construction. Once the project was completed, families could return to their original homes. Moved by such generosity, Lillian's father was overcome with emotion. Falling to his knees, he expressed his deep gratitude to the recruiter. The young man quickly stepped forward to help him up, insisting there was no need for such gestures. He then offered to show them a room where they could stay, allowing them to choose their accommodations. The surrounding townsfolk, who had watched the exchange, were astonished. Realizing that Ren's promises were genuine, they began clamoring to sign up for work. The square descended into chaos as people scrambled to register, eager to take advantage of the opportunity. Meanwhile, in his office, Ren was reviewing updates from the system. A notification suddenly popped up. Congratulations, you have received the lithium battery blueprint from the newbie gift pack. Instead of excitement, Ren felt a wave of irritation. He muttered to himself, questioning the system's logic. Without a generator, a battery was practically useless. Did the system expect him to summon a lightning strike? After venting his frustration, he calmed down and began to reflect. Ren's thoughts shifted to the task of training 5 individuals with high stats. He had no idea where to find such people. At first, he considered training Leah, but a review of her data through the system revealed that she had already reached her potential, leaving no room for further growth. After weighing his options, Ren concluded that his best course of action was to search for talented individuals within Island City. As Ren contemplated his next steps, a knock came at the door. Leah's voice called out from the other side, informing him that Lillian had come to see him. Ren granted her entry. Lillian stepped into the room, her face tense with worry. She quickly explained that something was wrong at the construction site. The workers were too lethargic to work. Ren was taken aback by the report and asked her to elaborate. Lillian recounted what she had observed during her visit to the site. She had gone to check on her father and noticed that none of the workers seemed to have the energy to complete their tasks. At first, she thought they were simply being lazy, but her father explained that everyone felt extraordinarily fatigued upon waking up. It wasn't just him. Every worker shared the same condition. Lillian had tried to encourage them, reminding them of the generous benefits Lord Ren had provided, but her words fell on deaf ears. The workers insisted that their fatigue wasn't deliberate. They genuinely lacked the strength to work. Some speculated that their bodies weren't used to the labor after such a long period of inactivity. Others suggested taking a day off to recover before resuming their duties. However, Lillian dismissed these excuses, declaring that there was no such illness. She firmly believed they were just being lazy. When she realized her efforts to motivate them were futile, she decided to bring the matter directly to Ren. After hearing her account, Ren wasted no time heading to the construction site. Upon arrival, he observed the workers firsthand. Their lethargy was undeniable. To understand the situation better, Ren used his system abilities to analyze their stats. On the surface, everything appeared normal, but he noticed one critical anomaly. All the workers were under a curse. Ren turned to Lillian and calmly explained the situation. "They're not sick, they're cursed." After realizing the workers were cursed, Ren surveyed the construction site, contemplating his next move. He decided to test his newly acquired skill, geological survey. Initially, he had planned to use this skill during the dam's construction, but the current situation presented an immediate need. With this ability, Ren could analyze various geological features, including mineral compositions, hydrology, and topography within a defined range. Under Ren's command, the system activated, conducting a survey within a 10-kilometer radius. Moments later, the results materialized in his mind. While the survey confirmed the absence of valuable resources like oil or metals, something unusual caught Ren's attention. Acting on his instincts, he asked Lillian's father to assist him in digging at the marked spot. The man agreed without hesitation, expressing his readiness to work hard for Ren. After digging about a meter into the ground, the group unearthed a strange black stone. Ren crouched to examine it closely, questioning its nature. Leah, standing nearby, was astonished by Ren's ability to sense the faint, magical energy emanating from the stone, something even she, with her expertise, had overlooked. Ren instructed the group to carefully remove the crystal and store it securely in a box. Turning to Leah, Ren asked what the usual procedure was for dealing with cursed individuals. Leah, caught off guard by the question, explained that curses were typically resolved by priests at a church or by high-ranking mages from the Mage Association. Hearing this, Ren frowned, suspecting a connection to the Mage Association. He then decided to take Lillian and her father to the local church for assistance. Lillian, worried, asked if her father was truly cursed. Ren reassured her, promising to make the culprit pay for their actions. The group quickly made their way to the church, where they were greeted by a stunning priestess. She welcomed Ren warmly, her demeanor calm and composed. Ren, ever cautious, used his system to assess her loyalty before entrusting her with the task. The system instantly revealed her stats: a loyalty level of 95%, race identified as elf, and an actual age of approximately 257 years, though she appeared no older than 24. Ren was surprised to learn she wasn't human, but felt reassured by her high loyalty. Introducing herself, the priestess said her name was Ari and referred to herself as the Holy Maiden of the Church. She politely inquired about the purpose of their visit. Pointing to Lillian's father, Ren explained that the man seemed to be cursed and asked if Ari could help. Ari nodded confidently and began examining the man. Closing her eyes briefly, she reopened them with a golden glow, scanning him intently. After a moment, she confirmed Ren's suspicion and began the treatment. Summoning a glowing sphere of light, she directed it into the man's body, expelling the dark energy. Instantly, the man felt revitalized, expressing his gratitude to Ren and vowing to return to work immediately. Ren, smiling, advised him to rest and ensure everything was fully resolved before resuming work. He then retrieved the box containing the black crystal and asked Ari for her opinion on it. Ari examined the crystal carefully, identifying it as a magic crystal infused with a significant amount of magical energy. She explained that such energy was often used for casting curses. However, she clarified that this particular curse was more of a prank, designed to cause fatigue rather than serious harm. The explanation made Ren uneasy. He asked whether such crystals were difficult to produce. Ari replied that for a high-level mage, creating one crystal a day was relatively simple. They could easily scatter them across the construction site. Ren's expression darkened as he realized the deliberate nature of the interference. Ari acknowledged Ren's project, praising its impact on reducing the number of people seeking aid from the church. Ren, now certain of the culprit's identity, resolved to take action. He asked Ari if it was possible to lift the curse over the entire construction site. Ari regretfully informed him that such a feat wasn't possible. Removing individual crystals daily would only slow the project's progress. Ren sighed, recognizing the need to address the root of the problem. Eri then mentioned someone who might be able to help but warned that this individual was eccentric. She provided an address, and Ren decided to investigate. Ren and Leah arrived at a large mansion, which Eri had identified as the home of Selena, the former president of the Mage Association. Approaching the door, Ren knocked firmly, his determination unwavering. Suddenly, Leah sensed danger and swiftly pulled Ren aside. Moments later, an explosion erupted from the upper floor of the mansion, sending smoke and debris into the air. Ren, startled, demanded to know what was happening. From the smoke, a stunning woman emerged, her voice filled with frustration. She cursed her failed experiment, vowing to succeed even if it meant blowing up the entirety of Island City. After entering the house, Ren calmly presented his request to Selena, explaining the issue and seeking her assistance. However, she refused outright, dismissing him curtly. She informed Ren that she was preoccupied with researching a new magical device and had no time to deal with his problems. Intrigued, Ren asked her to elaborate, questioning if she meant something like a magic wand. Selena sneered at the suggestion, mocking his limited understanding. Leah, her demeanor icy, immediately intervened, warning Selena to watch her tone when addressing young Master Ren. Annoyed by Leah's reprimand, Selena turned her gaze toward her and commented on Leah's impressive magical power. With a sly smile, Selena suggested that Leah stay as her assistant. In return, Selena promised to assist Ren once her research succeeded. Sparks of lightning crackled around Selena as she displayed her power. Leah, unflinching, prepared to retaliate, her voice sharp as she offered to teach Selena some manners. Sensing the rising tension, Ren stepped between them, urging Leah to stand down. He reminded her that they were here for help, not to start a fight. Turning to Selena's cluttered workspace, Ren asked if she had created the items scattered across the table. He wanted to know if they were magical devices. Selena's eyes gleamed with pride as she confirmed his observation. She clarified, however, that everything on the table was a failed product. She explained that she was trying to create a magical device capable of sealing the lightning element magic within her body. Ren was astonished. He marveled at the concept, equating it to storing electrical energy. Selena confirmed his interpretation and mentioned that the earlier explosion was due to her devices failing to withstand her power. Dismissing him again, she said she needed to rest and continue her research. Ren paused, deep in thought, before making an offer. He told Selena that if he could help her create the device she needed, she would have to assist him with his issues regarding the Mages Guild. Selena, skeptical and irritated, brushed him off, claiming her research was far too complex for someone like him to solve. Remaining composed, Ren assured her he was serious. He promised to help her create the magical device, asking for her support in return. Intrigued but doubtful, Selena finally agreed, setting a condition. If Ren succeeded, she would not only deal with Malcolm, but also ensure the Mages Guild obeyed his every command. However, if he failed, she wouldn't hesitate to punish him. Without wasting time, Ren asked Selena to prepare the required materials. Using the blueprint provided by the system, he guided her in assembling a lithium battery pack consisting of 8 large batteries linked together. Despite their efforts, Ren felt nervous. They lacked a reliable power source to test the device, as a hydraulic generator wasn't available. They had no choice but to rely on Selena's magic as a substitute. Selena, following Ren's instructions, assembled the components but remained skeptical. She reminded him that most materials couldn't handle her magical power and warned that the device might explode. Ren, unfazed, handed her the wires and reassured her. He explained that the battery pack had a capacity of approximately 185 watt-hours and urged her to channel her energy into it. Reluctantly, Selena began discharging her magic. To her astonishment, the device absorbed her energy without any issues. Curious, she increased the output, yet the battery remained stable. Selena, shocked, demanded to know why the device hadn't exploded. Ren smirked and taunted her, suggesting that her magical power wasn't as impressive as she thought. Infuriated, Selena unleashed her full strength. Even at maximum output, the battery pack held steady, showing no signs of damage. Selena was left speechless at how much power the device could contain and how effortlessly Ren had built it. Ren, satisfied, stepped forward to check the charge level. The battery was at 87% capacity. Internally, he marveled at Selina's strength. She had charged nearly the entire pack, enough to power an electric car for over 3,000 kilometers. Ren's confidence grew as he turned to Selina and declared his plans to revolutionize the Mages Guild. He referred to them as potential power banks and explained his vision for their magical abilities. Selina, intrigued, asked if Ren himself could use lightning magic. Ren didn't deny it. Instead, he claimed he could make everyone in Island City capable of wielding magic. Selina was skeptical, pointing out that magic couldn't simply be learned by anyone. Ren, however, remained composed. He hinted at possessing a magical device even more powerful than the battery pack and promised to show her a world where magic was accessible to all if she agreed to help him. Selina, both baffled and curious, couldn't imagine such a possibility, but decided to continue working with him. The next day at the Mages Guild, Malcolm was leisurely reading a book, confident that Ren would soon come begging for his help. His calm was interrupted by Selina's sudden arrival. Seeing her enter, Malcolm froze in shock. The former president of the Mages Guild was the last person he expected to see. Stammering, he greeted her cautiously, wondering why she had come. Selina's voice rose in anger as she confronted Malcolm, accusing him of daring to challenge the authority of the Grand Duke's household. Her words carried a sharp edge as she questioned whether he was planning a rebellion. Malcolm, visibly shaken, stammered nervously, denying any such intentions. He assured Selina that he would never harbor such dangerous thoughts. Unconvinced, Selina grabbed Malcolm by the collar, her patience visibly wearing thin. She demanded the truth, insisting he confess what he had done at Ren's construction site. Malcolm, trembling, quickly relented. He admitted to summoning all the mages from the guild and inciting their anger by claiming that young Master Ren had disrespected them. He confessed to instructing the mages to craft curse-infused crystals and using teleportation magic to plant them underground at the construction site. This scheme was meant to cause the workers to feel fatigued, hoping Ren would blame them for laziness. Malcolm's goal was to force Ren to apologize and seek closer cooperation with the Mages Guild. Selina listened with a mix of disbelief and frustration. Shaking her head, she called Malcolm a fool and pointed out that he had been manipulated. When Malcolm, still confused, asked who had used him, Selina dismissed his question. Instead, she ordered him to recall every mage involved in the sabotage immediately. Malcolm nodded hastily and rushed off to follow her command. Once Malcolm was gone, Selina pulled out a talisman to contact Ren. She informed him that she had resolved the issue with the Mages Guild. Through the talisman, Ren expressed his gratitude, thanking her for her assistance. Selina, curious, asked if he needed her help dealing with Eldry, offering to make him disappear without a trace. Ren quickly declined, waving his hand reflexively, even though she couldn't see him. He explained that Eldry wasn't a significant concern and that he still needed him to lure out a bigger threat. Accepting Ren's decision, Selina agreed not to interfere. Her tone shifted to excitement as she brought up the new inventions Ren had mentioned earlier. She pressed him for details, asking when they would be ready and insisting he call her when he began working on them. Ren reassured her that he would keep her informed, but emphasized the importance of having the guild's mages finish charging the battery clusters first. The next day, at the city lord's residence, Eldry met with a mysterious man cloaked in shadow. Eldry, visibly worried, reported that Ren had already taken control of the Mages Guild. He nervously asked for guidance. The mysterious man, however, remained calm and dismissive, stating that the Mages Guild posed no real threat, aside from Selina. He redirected Eldry's attention to Ren's dam project, warning that if the dam succeeded, it could revitalize the people of Islan, a scenario they couldn't allow. Eldry assured the man that he had already set traps for Ren and revealed an additional plan. He intended to pressure the nobles in charge of food supplies to raise prices, undermining Ren's efforts. When the mysterious man expressed doubt about the nobles' loyalty, Eldry confidently explained that while the nobles might betray him, they would never betray their own financial interests. Flicking a gold coin into the air with a smirk, Eldry declared that Ren's funds wouldn't last until the dam's completion. As the coin landed on the table, the mysterious man's figure dissolved into thin air. Meanwhile, in the bustling market, Lillian was buying supplies for the construction site when a shopkeeper rudely chased her away. His tone was condescending as he told her to leave if she couldn't afford the goods. Lillian, frustrated, pointed out the absurd price hike, Just the day before, 2 bags of grain had cost 1 gold coin, but now 1 bag alone was priced at 2 gold coins. The shopkeeper, unfazed, arrogantly stated that he could set whatever prices he wanted. He mocked her inability to pay and raised his hand as if to strike her. The commotion drew the attention of onlookers, many of whom were outraged by the shopkeeper's actions. Lillian, determined to fulfill her task for Ren, accused the merchants of profiteering and warned them of Ren's potential wrath. The shopkeeper sneered, dismissing her threat. He claimed his business was honest and that Ren had no grounds to interfere. His arrogance only deepened the frustration of those watching. At the church, Ari was equally infuriated by the rampant price gouging. She noted that food prices had tripled in just 3 days, leaving her with inadequate grain to sustain the people through the winter. Handing a pouch of coins to her assistant Era, she instructed her to buy whatever supplies she could, promising to figure out the rest later. Era hesitated, surprised by the unusually large sum of money, and pointed out that bribing guards typically required much less. Ari sighed, urging Era to follow her orders without question. Before Era could act, Leah appeared suddenly, snatching the pouch with lightning speed and handing it to Ren. With a calm but determined expression, Ren suggested a collaboration. He proposed working together on a larger plan, one that would address the root of the crisis and prevent further exploitation by the merchants. Ari looked at Ren with suspicion, questioning what kind of cooperation he had in mind. Ren smiled at her guarded demeanor, suggesting she relax and not be so tense about discussing cooperation. He then casually mentioned that he knew she was an elf. Ari, though deeply concerned that Ren had discovered her true identity, maintained her composure and denied it, insisting that an elf couldn't possibly be living in a human city. Ren, unfazed, tossed a pouch of coins back to Ari and reassured her that he held no malicious intentions toward her or her kind. Ari, avoiding the topic, redirected the conversation, again asking what kind of cooperation he was proposing. Ren gestured toward the sacks of food on a cart nearby and explained that he wanted to collaborate on resolving the issue of food supplies in the city. While Ari respected Ren's determination, she doubted his ability to tackle such a deeply entrenched problem. She openly voiced her skepticism, prompting Ren to ask why she felt that way. Ari elaborated, explaining that food supplies in Eastland were controlled by 4 major families who had held power in the city for over a century. These families tightly regulated prices, and their influence was unshakable. She reminded Ren that although he had used strong-arm tactics at the recent banquet to intimidate some of them, they were cunning individuals who would undoubtedly find a way to recover their losses. Ren interrupted her, curious about her in-depth knowledge of the city's inner workings. Ari admitted that she had lived in Islan for over 120 years and understood its complexities well. She further suggested that had Ren eliminated the Elwyn family at the banquet, there might have been a chance for reconciliation. But now it was too late. Ari added that due to war and natural disasters, food was already scarce, and if prices remained high, her tribe would struggle to survive the winter. Ren cut her off again, his gaze resolute. He promised Ari that within 2 weeks, food prices in Island would plummet to levels even lower than before the recent price hikes. At the mansion of Augustus Ken, head of the Klein family, a celebratory gathering was underway. Augustus expressed his gratitude to Eldry for his support, acknowledging that their alliance had led to significant profits. Others in the room echoed their thanks, raising their glasses to toast Augustus and their shared success. The mood was jubilant as the group reveled in their recent gains, confident in their strategy. Their celebration was interrupted by a servant announcing that Ren had invited them to attend a banquet at his mansion. One of the men, startled by the news, speculated nervously whether Ren was planning to punish them. Turning to Augustus, he asked for guidance on how they should proceed. Augustus, calm and calculating, reassured them that they had nothing to fear. He explained that their trade in food supplies was entirely legal and protected by the system they had established. Augustus emphasized that as long as they didn't openly defy Ren, they wouldn't be in danger. He pointed out that the collective strength of their 4 families was formidable, and that even the king had no authority to interfere with food pricing. With this reasoning, the group relaxed, agreeing that their position was secure. Augustus suggested that if Ren attempted to pressure them, they could make a token gesture by slightly lowering prices, perhaps by 5 copper coins. However, he warned them sternly that any betrayal would result in severe consequences. With their confidence restored, Augustus encouraged the group to prepare for the banquet. Despite their initial surprise at his insistence on changing into old, tattered clothes, they followed his lead. At Ren's mansion, a servant informed him that Augustus and the invited guests had arrived. Ren instructed the servant to invite them in and ensure the kitchen prepared the food. When Augustus and the others entered, Ren immediately noticed their deliberate attempts to appear impoverished, their once lavish clothing replaced with ragged attire. Amused, he thought to himself how poorly they played their roles. Maintaining his composure, Ren greeted them with mock surprise. He commented on how unexpected it was to see the nobleman who controlled Elan's food supply looking so destitute. Augustus quickly responded, praising Ren's projects and claiming that they, too, wanted to contribute to the greater good. Another man chimed in, explaining that under Augustus's leadership, they had not only donated money to Ren's initiatives, but also sold food from their warehouses at the lowest possible prices, even taking a loss to help the citizens. Leah, observing their shameless behavior, felt nothing but disdain. Their blatant lies and attempts to deceive Ren did not surprise her. Ren, however, played along, thanking them for their understanding and claiming to be deeply moved by their support. He explained that he had invited them to discuss the grain trade plan. Before Ren could continue, Augustus interrupted, asserting that they understood Ren's financial difficulties. He reiterated that at the current price of 2 gold coins per sack of food, they were already selling at a loss. The others nodded in agreement, backing Augustus's claim. Ren smiled and clarified his intent. He proposed raising the price of food in Island to 4 gold coins per sack starting the next day. His statement left the nobles baffled. Augustus, confused, questioned whether Ren truly intended to increase prices. Ren confirmed with a calm yet commanding tone, explaining that not only would the price rise to 4 gold coins, but he would also take a 30% commission on all sales. When Ren announced that the price of grain would increase to 4 gold coins per sack, with a 30% commission going to him, Augustus was visibly confused. He questioned whether Ren had misspoken, unsure if he had heard correctly. Ren didn't repeat himself, instead calmly reminding Augustus about the 30% commission he would be taking. Hearing this, Augustus and the other nobles quickly exchanged delighted glances. Initially, they had underestimated Ren, thinking him to be just an inexperienced young lord. Now, they believed he was a cunning businessman like themselves. They viewed Ren as someone who understood their interests and figured that with his backing, their business ventures would thrive. Regret filled them for not realizing his shrewdness earlier. They could have aligned with him much sooner. Augustus, while excited by Ren's statement, knew they couldn't act rashly. Without official documentation, raising prices too high could cause chaos, potentially harming their interests. With this in mind, Augustus voiced his concerns, politely thanking Ren for his understanding and asking when an official announcement would be issued. Ren, prepared for this, instructed Leah to hand him a document. With a cheerful tone, he informed them that he had already written and stamped the official notice with his family seal, and it would be posted after their meal. As the conversation continued, Ren reminded the nobles that from now on, they would follow his instructions, urging them to learn from the consequences the Elwyn family had suffered. Augustus eagerly assured him that they wouldn't disappoint. After the banquet, the nobles gathered once again at Augustus's residence. Ren's unexpected approach had left them bewildered. They debated whether to report this new development to Eldry, noting how strange it was for Ren to increase prices rather than lower them. Some suspected he was motivated purely by greed. Augustus, however, dismissed their doubts, calling it a golden opportunity. He reminded them that if too many people learned of their scheme, their profits would shrink. He assured them that Ren was merely a child using benefits to draw them in and urged them to keep the price hike a secret. A vast fortune was within their grasp, and only a fool would let such an opportunity slip away. Despite Augustus's confidence, one cautious noble expressed unease. He admitted that in all his years, he had never encountered such a lucrative opportunity, which made him wary. Nonetheless, he pledged to follow Augustus's lead, bowing deeply as a show of loyalty. The others quickly followed suit, swearing their allegiance to Augustus. Satisfied, Augustus laughed heartily, declaring that from now on they would act as one. He He proposed they immediately buy up all the grain from smaller merchants before the announcement was posted, ensuring they controlled the market and maximized their profits. Meanwhile, back at Ren's estate, unexpected guests arrived. Scientist Era stormed in, visibly furious. She accused Ren of siding with the corrupt merchants, demanding to know why he had promised to lower grain prices yet allowed them to skyrocket instead. Her anger flared as she declared that she wouldn't stand by while the elf race was being exploited. Lillian quickly stepped in, trying to calm her down. She assured Era that Ren intended to reduce food prices and urged her to trust him. Still agitated, Era snapped back, insisting that Ren had already become an accomplice to the greedy merchants. Despite this, Lillian maintained her faith in Ren's decisions, pleading with Era to believe in his plan. After a moment of tense silence, Era turned to Ren, her expression filled with concern. Hesitantly, she asked if he truly intended to raise food prices. Ren smiled but chose not to reveal his full strategy, simply reassuring her that food prices would drop soon. In the worst case, he promised, they would fall to their lowest point within 2 weeks. Era, unconvinced, felt Ren was being naive. She believed he didn't understand the harsh realities of the world. Having lived for over 200 years, she had never seen food prices decrease after a major spike. Ren, sensing her doubt, grew serious. He posed a rhetorical question. If he put a knife to the nobles' throats, how much did she think they would lower the price by? 1 coin? 10 coins? Era had no answer but remained skeptical. She argued that raising the price to 4 gold coins per sack was excessive, noting that at 2 gold coins, the common people had already struggled to afford food. With the price doubled, starvation seemed inevitable. Ren maintained his calm demeanor, explaining that whether the price was 2 or 4 gold coins, the people would starve either way. The only difference was the timing. He then declared that simply lowering the price by a few coins would be meaningless. His goal wasn't charity, it was to completely ruin the merchants and strip them of their fortunes. 7 days passed, during which Ren focused on teaching Selena about the creation and functionality of lithium batteries. Selena, fascinated by the device's complexity, was thoroughly engrossed in the lessons. Their session was interrupted by Leah's sudden appearance, announcing that Saintess Era had come to visit once again. Over the past few days, Era had visited frequently, prompting Ren to wonder if she had too much free time on her hands. Selena, equally curious, asked Ren why he had deliberately raised food prices. By now, grain prices in the city had soared to nearly 7 gold coins per sack. Ren, surprised by how quickly prices had risen, didn't have time to answer as Era burst into the room. She immediately scolded him, exclaiming that not only the common people but even some nobles could no longer afford food. She demanded to know if he realized how bad the situation had become. Remaining calm, Ren asked Leah how many days had passed since the price increase. Leah quickly responded, confirming that it had been 7 days. Hearing this, Ren smiled, declaring that it was time to deal with the merchants. Era, still frustrated, demanded that Ren stop speaking in vague terms and explain himself. She warned him that if he didn't, the elf tribe would soon cut ties with him. Ren finally responded, explaining that he hadn't shared the full details of his plan earlier because he feared it might disrupt things and raise suspicions among the nobles. Now, with everything in place, he was ready to explain. Ren revealed that the announcement setting a minimum food price of 4 gold coins per sack had been in effect for 7 days. He then posed a question to Era, asking what she thought Ailing City lacked the most right now. After a moment of thought, she replied that there didn't seem to be a shortage of anything. Ren smiled knowingly at her answer and calmly responded, "What the city lacks are merchants who sell grain." The Saintess paused, realization dawning on her face. Ren continued, explaining how greed was the easiest flaw to exploit. The absurdly high grain prices had drawn merchants from neighboring towns like moths to a flame, all eager to cash in on the inflated market. Unbeknownst to them, they had unknowingly turned Aislinn into the most food-rich city in the empire. The rush to sell at sky-high prices had spiraled into an uncontrollable cycle. By the end of the day, Ren predicted, the 4 noble houses controlling the grain trade would cease to exist. He reached into his bag and handed the Saintess a piece of paper, instructing her to post the notice across every major street and alley. The announcement stated that Lady Saintess, the holy maiden of the church, disapproved of Ren's methods and would instead sell the church's food reserves at only 1 gold coin per sack. The Saintess was instantly skeptical, questioning why Ren was willing to give her such good publicity. Ren smirked. Because, he said, he didn't have any food to sell. The saintess frowned, confused. She argued that she barely had enough grain to sustain her people through winter. Ren confirmed that was exactly why she needed to sell. The panic on her face was almost amusing as she refused outright. There was no way she would put her people at risk. Selena chuckled at her reaction, shaking her head. She told the saintess she was being naive. If she truly wanted to protect her people, she should trust Ren. Otherwise, she'd suffer heavy losses. The saintess still hesitated. The elves didn't care about money, only food. Ren's voice took on a calm, almost reassuring tone. He told her to trust him, follow his lead, and she wouldn't lose anything. In fact, her food supplies would only increase. He then turned to Selena, instructing her and the Mage Guild to seal off the city. No one was to leave. Selena nodded. She'd make sure not a single rat escaped. As the saintess and Selena left, Leah stood silently. Concern etched across her face. Ren caught on immediately, asking what was bothering her. She admitted she was worried things wouldn't go as smoothly as he expected. What if the merchants held out for a few days and the church's food ran out? Ren chuckled, reassuring her. There were two kinds of strategies: covert schemes and overt plans. Covert schemes could be exposed, but overt plans were unavoidable. The merchants had already put everything they had into this gamble, blinded by their own greed. If they caught wind of food prices dropping, they would scramble to sell their stock before suffering devastating losses. Delaying would mean financial ruin. Meanwhile, at the Augustus estate, the nobles were in a state of panic. One of them voiced his concern, informing Augustus that the church had announced it would sell food at only 1 gold coin per sack to aid the people. Another noble echoed the alarm, pointing out that they had underestimated the church's resources. They had purchased all their grain at 2 gold coins per sack. If the church's grain flooded the market, they would take massive losses. Augustus, however, remained calm. He dismissed their concerns, questioning how much food a single church could possibly have. At best, it could sustain the city for a few days. His plan was simple: send men to infiltrate the church and buy up as much of the discounted grain as possible. The next day, a large crowd gathered outside the church, eager to buy food. Standing at the entrance, the saintess tried to maintain order, raising her hand to calm the mob. She assured them there was no need to panic. There was more than enough grain to go around. She even claimed the Holy Pope himself had sent 100,000 sacks of grain, and more shipments would arrive in the coming days. Some in the crowd remained skeptical, assuming it was a lie. Tension grew as they began pushing forward. But just then, a group of soldiers arrived, instantly silencing the restless masses. One soldier stepped forward, addressing the saintess with a formal tone. He confirmed that the grain had indeed been sent by the Holy Pope, and that more would arrive in a steady stream. The saintess barely managed to hold back her growing anxiety. Nodding awkwardly, internally, she was in turmoil. What in the world was Ren up to? If the Holy Pope ever found out about this, she'd be in deep trouble. The citizens, however, had no such concerns. Cheers erupted through the crowd, their worries fading as relief washed over them. They had food. They were saved. The sight made the merchants break into a cold sweat. One of them muttered that it was over. This entire venture had been sabotaged by the church. Another quickly did the math. He had spent 60 silver coins per sack, and after factoring in transport and other expenses, his total cost per sack was 95 silver coins. If he wanted to avoid a complete loss, he had no choice but to start selling. Without hesitation, he shouted to the crowd that he was selling grain. 95 silver coins per sack. Instantly, people rushed forward. Others in the market saw what was happening and jumped into the price war, slashing their prices lower and lower. In that moment, the price of grain in Aislinn City collapsed. Watching the chaos unfold, Leah was in awe. Everything was happening exactly as Ren had predicted. She turned to him, excitement shining in her eyes. If the price of grain kept dropping, the construction project would remain right on schedule. Ren smirked, but his expression carried something deeper, something almost predatory. Leah's estimation was far too conservative. 50 silver coins per sack? She was underestimating just how desperate those merchants would become. He leaned back, completely at ease. By the time Augustus and his allies started dumping their stock, grain wouldn't just be cheap. It would be worthless. Leah was taken aback. Was Ren really saying Augustus and his allies would start dumping their supplies just like the other merchants? They had bought grain at 2 gold coins per sack, maybe even more. And at the banquet, they had seemed so united. Surely they wouldn't betray each other that easily. Ren chuckled, amused by the naivete. United? That was giving them way too much credit. When faced with personal losses, greed always won out. At this point, the price of grain wasn't even his concern anymore. It was time to handle the final phase of his plan, with the Saintess. Without hesitation, he turned to Leah and told her it was time to go. Meanwhile, chaos was erupting in Augustus's mansion. A butler burst into the room, panic in his voice as he reported that the merchants from outside the city had gone mad. They were slashing prices repeatedly, and right now grain was selling for just 75 silver coins per sack. One of the nobles, Lord Roland, jumped to his feet in outrage. That had to be impossible. They controlled all the grain in the city. How could outside merchants be selling grain at all? The butler, clearly terrified, insisted it was true. Augustus, deep in thought, furrowed his brows before his eyes widened with sudden realization. It all made sense now. His voice carried a bitter mix of frustration and admiration as he muttered to himself. Ren had played them all like a fiddle. The other nobles stared at him, confused. What did he mean? Augustus laid it out for them. First, Ren had spread rumors about skyrocketing grain prices in Iceland, triggering a gold rush among merchants in neighboring cities. Blinded by greed, they had swarmed the city, bringing in more food than Augustus and his allies could have ever anticipated. Then, Ren had used the church's name to crash the market, forcing those merchants to panic sell their stock to avoid devastating losses. The result? A market-wide price collapse, with grain practically flooding into the city. Roland's face went pale. His back was slick with cold sweat. To think Ren would use such ruthless, underhanded tactics. Augustus wasn't done yet. He had one last plan, a desperate gamble that could still turn the tide. He explained that this grain would only sustain Iceland's people for a few months. If they could hold onto their own stockpile and wait for the inevitable shortage, they could still resell at high prices. The only way to survive this crisis was to stand together. If even one of them broke rank and started selling, they'd all be ruined. Roland nodded seriously, agreeing that they had no choice but to hold out. He made a show of declaring that he would rush home to lock down his stores and ensure nothing was sold. Then, without wasting another second, he bolted for the door. As soon as he left, the remaining nobles exchanged knowing glances. Roland was clearly planning to sell everything first, and if he was going to betray them, well, why should they wait? Two more nobles immediately excused themselves, feigning loyalty, but secretly planning to do the exact same thing. Augustus, watching them go, clenched his fists. He turned to his butler, who nervously asked if they should also secure their grain. Augustus snapped, kicking the man aside. Fool! If they didn't sell now, those other traders would undercut them and leave them with worthless stock. In an instant, he gave the order. Sell everything, every last sack. Back at the church, Ren arrived to meet with the Saintess, casually asking if the elves now had enough grain to last the winter. The Saintess was still trying to wrap her head around the absurdity of it all. The more they sold, the more grain they seemed to have. It made no sense. Ren smirked. It was all about buying low and selling high. Every transaction was turning a profit, tens of thousands of gold coins at a time. Just then, Lillian came rushing in with fresh news. The price had dropped again. 1 gold coin could now buy 3 whole sacks of grain. Ren turned to the Saintess with a smug grin. He had told her to wait, but she hadn't believed him. If she bought now, she'd have 10 times more food than before. Now, he said, it was time to discuss their real business. The Saintess hesitated. What exactly did he want to trade with the elven tribe? Ren extended a hand, his expression unreadable. Everything. The Saintess blinked in confusion. He elaborated. He wanted to collaborate on every aspect of trade: food, clothing, housing, transportation. From grain to land, everything was on the table. The Saintess flustered. Something this big wasn't for her to decide. He'd have to negotiate with the Elven Queen directly. Ren had no objections. He handed her a letter, telling her to arrange the meeting. As he watched her leave, he reflected on his next moves. The grain crisis had served as a lesson for the nobles of Iceland. They wouldn't dare oppose him for a while. The Mage Guild was already under his control. The church? Just a matter of time. That left Eldrick, the city lord. He still had 2 crucial weapons: military power and tax control. If Ren could seize the military, Eldrick would be completely defenseless. Now he just needed a way in. Before he could get lost in thought, Leah appeared, interrupting him. She gently suggested that he rest. He had been working non-stop. Ren shrugged it off. He wasn't that tired. Before they could continue, a commotion erupted. A furious man stormed into the church, ranting about corrupt soldiers abusing the Grand Duke's authority. He cursed the heavens, demanding to know why the divine hadn't struck them down. The saintess stepped forward, calmly asking what had happened. The man, barely containing his rage, explained that he had come to Iceland to do business. Profit and loss were expected, but on his way back, the city's soldiers had robbed him blind, seizing all his money. Ren, intrigued, stepped in. He asked for details. The merchant, still seething, turned on him. Who was he? Ren simply smiled. Someone very interested in doing business. Ren, Leah, and Lillian disguised themselves as merchants and joined a caravan heading out of the city. When they arrived at the city gate, a guard immediately stopped them, demanding to know where they were coming from and what was in their cart. Lillian stepped forward, keeping her voice steady as she explained that she was a resident of Iceland, transporting goods purchased in the city for trade with the elven tribe. The guard sneered, clearly unimpressed. Without hesitation, he ordered his men to search the carts. The soldiers yanked off the covers and started smashing open barrels with their spears. Lillian's protest came fast, her voice sharp with frustration. If they kept wrecking her cargo, how was she supposed to transport it? One of the soldiers quickly reported that the carts were empty. The officer in charge, unfazed, announced that they still needed to pay a toll. Lillian's temper flared. They had already destroyed her goods, and now they wanted to charge a fee? The guard smirked, stating it was either pay up or turn back. Before Lillian could argue further, Ren, still concealed inside the cart, instructed her to just pay. With a deep breath, she forced herself to comply, handing over a silver coin. But the guard wasn't done. With a smug grin, he claimed that under Lord Ren's orders, the toll had increased. The new fee? 5 silver coins. Leah snapped, unable to contain her outrage. That was more than the total value of the goods they were transporting. The guard didn't care. Either they paid or they could stop blocking the road. Gritting her teeth, Lillian handed over the coins. Internally, she seethed. Someone was using Ren's name to extort people. Just wait. Once his plans were complete, she would love to see how he dealt with these crooks. The soldiers pocketed the money and waved them through. As soon as they left the city, a nearby merchant huffed in frustration, cursing the despicable young Lord Ren for his outrageous toll increases. Ren, still in disguise, raised an eyebrow and turned to him. The merchant traveling alongside them immediately protested, warning him to show some respect. Lord Ren was a benefactor of Iceland, and he wouldn't tolerate slander against him. Ren chuckled at the man's blind loyalty. The guard had outright stated that Ren had ordered the toll increase, yet the merchant still defended him. The man nodded firmly. Ren had lowered grain prices and helped the people, even though it had cost him a fortune. That was the first time he had seen a noble genuinely care for his people. If he ever met Ren in person, he'd gladly risk his life for him. Ren remained calm and pressed further, casually bringing up rumors about the youngest son of the Grand Lord killing someone at a banquet and forcing the townspeople to dig for something. The merchant snorted, dismissing the story. That was about the Eldwin family. They had gotten exactly what they deserved. Ren feigned curiosity, asking what else people knew about them. Lowering his voice, the merchant leaned in and whispered that everyone who did business in Iceland knew the truth. The Eldwin family's wealth didn't just come from gambling houses. Their real business was human trafficking. Ren's fingers clenched into fists, fury bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Human trafficking? Silently, he cursed. He was already struggling with a manpower shortage, and these bastards were out there running an underground slave trade. If he wanted to secure his territory, he needed control over the border troops. If internal chaos broke out, it would be too easy for outside forces to exploit the situation. Before he could think further, Lillian's outraged voice rang out from outside the cart. Another toll? The border guards had stopped them again, demanding additional payment. Lillian protested. They had already paid when leaving Iceland. Why were they being charged again? The guards scoffed, claiming that the toll for Iceland was separate from the one for the border post. Lillian wasn't buying it. This was blatant robbery. Smirking, the guard stated the new fee, 1 gold coin. Lillian's anger flared, but Ren cut in before she could argue. His voice was eerily calm as he told her to pay. She reluctantly handed over the gold, but the guards still weren't done. They demanded that everyone step out of the cart. This was a border post after all, and everyone entering or leaving needed to be inspected. Ren stepped down from the cart, his gaze locking onto the guard with a sharp intensity. If they wanted to inspect, then they should go ahead and do it. Ren watched as the guard stiffened, beads of sweat forming on his brow. The man's glare shifted toward the merchant behind Ren, his expression twisting with resentment. He recognized the merchant immediately and sneered, calling him an old fool for daring to return. Ren, catching the exchange, turned his attention to the merchant, sensing a deeper history between them. Trist, looking uncomfortable, reluctantly explained. The soldiers at the border were former bandits who had worked under the Eldwin family, primarily involved in kidnapping and human trafficking. They had been granted positions here as enforcers, overseeing illegal toll collections under the guise of regulation. The soldier scoffed and reminded Trist of a supposed past debt, claiming he hadn't paid enough last time, and that now he owed extra. Without waiting for a response, he struck Trist hard across the face. Trist staggered back, protesting that he had paid the full amount before, but the soldier, unmoved, simply pointed his weapon at him, demanding even more money. It wasn't just about the tolls anymore. Now that they had recognized him, they saw an opportunity to extort him for even more gold. If it had been someone else, they might have let it slide with just a few coins, but since it was him, the price had now risen to 5 gold coins. Ren observed the situation quietly before making a simple observation. If the tolls were this outrageously high, why was Aislenn's financial income still so low? The soldier, uninterested in answering, dismissed Ren outright, but then his gaze landed on Leah, and his demeanor shifted. Amusement flickered across his face as he took a step toward her. Trist, trying to de-escalate, hurriedly produced a money pouch, hoping that 5 gold coins would be enough to settle things. The soldier, smug, accepted the pouch and casually tossed it to one of his men. But instead of stopping there, he reached out toward Leah, clearly looking for more than just money. Before he could touch her, Ren stepped in, blocking his path. Cold and calculating, he regarded the soldier and made his decision. Someone like this was beyond redemption. He had considered using them for labor, but they were a lost cause. The soldier, enraged, lunged forward, thrusting his spear at Ren. Leah moved before the attack could land. In a flash, the soldier was dead, his body collapsing lifelessly to the ground. The others immediately recoiled in terror. Panic spread through the ranks, and within moments, some of them abandoned their weapons, turning to flee. Their cries for help echoed as they scrambled away, desperate to escape what had just unfolded. Leah was already moving, cutting them down before they could escape. It wasn't even a fight, it was a massacre. Ren barely paid attention to the slaughter, instead pulling up the system's information on these so-called soldiers. Their stats were abysmal, hardly befitting military men. This wasn't a proper army, it was just a gang of thugs in uniform. Then, a memory surfaced. His father's warning before he left for Aislen rang in his mind. Beyond Aislen lay the territory of the enemy country, and any conflict could lead to disastrous consequences. If a war erupted with the Empire, Ren would be the one paying the price. Just as Leah finished dealing with the remaining soldiers, a commanding voice rang out across the border post. A man demanded to know who dared to cause trouble at Aislen's gates. The soldiers, who had moments ago been fleeing for their lives, suddenly found hope. General Caesar had arrived. Seeing the man, the remaining soldiers scrambled toward him, pleading for his help. They painted themselves as victims, desperate for protection from the murderous attackers before them. Caesar, frowning, took in the scene, then set his gaze on Ren, demanding an explanation. Ren wasted no time using his skill to assess the general. The man's stats were impressive, most attributes above 70, making him a formidable fighter, but there was one problem. His loyalty was dangerously low, sitting at a mere 12. If not for that, he would have been an invaluable asset. Ren, unshaken, greeted him directly. He recognized him as Caesar of the Holker family, the man whose brother served under his sister, Prisia Edgar. Caesar hesitated at the mention of his brother, momentarily caught off guard. He had received a letter about Ren's arrival in Iceland, along with orders to ensure his safety. But conflicting interests clouded his mind. A month ago, Eldrick had personally approached him with a chest full of gold. Along with the bribe came whispers of dissatisfaction, insinuations that the Duke had stationed him in this remote outpost because he didn't value him. Others encouraged his resentment, telling him that his talents were wasted here, that he was entitled to more. Even now, staring at the young noble before him, Caesar felt no guilt over his past decisions. He had made his choice. Gripping his sword, he issued a direct command, calling Ren an imposter and ordering his men to cut him down. In return, he promised them great rewards. The soldiers hesitated for only a second. Then, emboldened by their general's presence, they drew their weapons, preparing to attack. Caesar, fully aware of his crimes and the bribes he had taken from Eldrick, chose to deny any recognition of Ren. Without hesitation, he commanded his men to capture and execute him. Leah's fury was immediate. The audacity of Caesar's actions meant outright rebellion against the Empire. The soldiers hesitated, visibly uneasy, realizing the weight of the crime they were about to commit. If they followed through, their entire families could face execution. But Caesar remained steadfast. He reminded them of their own involvement, extortion, illegal tolls, and aligning with Eldrick. Their hands were already dirty. He pushed further, recounting Ren's actions in Aislinn City, how he had dismantled the Eldwin family and bankrupted 4 noble houses. With nowhere else to go, Caesar proposed a final gamble. If they took all the wealth they had stolen over the years and presented Ren's head to the Orvis Empire, they could secure new lives as minor nobles. He left them with a choice: live in fear or take a chance at something greater. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, torn between fear and greed. Slowly, they turned their weapons toward Ren. Seeing their shift in loyalty, Caesar's confidence soared. The fight was decided before it had even begun. He smugly offered Ren a final chance to say his last words. Yet Ren remained unfazed. He extended one last offer. If Caesar repented, he would be spared. But seeing the unwavering greed in his eyes, Ren was disappointed. Before he could say anything further, Caesar commanded his men to attack. The soldiers surged forward. Leah, enraged, tore part of her dress for better mobility and launched herself at them. In one swift motion, she felled an enemy with a precise strike. Another lunged at her with a spear, but she dodged, spinning gracefully before countering with a dagger to the throat. Amidst the chaos, she spotted a soldier closing in on Ren. Trusting him to hold his ground, she instead hurled her knife, taking down the attacker before he could get close. Ren, his patience now exhausted, turned to Caesar, offering one last chance to back down. Caesar ignored him and instead raised the stakes. He promised a massive reward: gold for whoever landed the killing blow on Ren. The soldiers, driven by greed, charged recklessly. He set his sights on Leah, knowing that taking her down would make the fight easier, but she anticipated the move, countering with a devastating kick that sent him crashing into the dirt. Others swarmed her, attempting to overwhelm her with sheer numbers. She dispatched them with a series of fluid strikes, a spinning kick sending several flying before they could even react. Recognizing Leah's strength, Caesar turned to his trump card, the Mage. With a flick of his wrist, the spellcaster conjured a burst of energy, unleashing 3 ice arrows at her. Leah shattered them mid-air with a rapid series of kicks, but the fragments froze the ground beneath her, trapping her feet in ice. Seizing the opening, Caesar roared for his men to attack. The soldiers split into 2 groups, one rushing Leah, the other targeting Ren. The battle was quickly shifting against them. Ren, unfazed, tossed a hammer to Leah and instructed her to leap. In his other hand, he readied a wire connected to an electrical device. Leah, trusting his judgment, slammed the hammer onto the ice, encasing her feet, breaking free before jumping into the air. The frozen ground provided the perfect conductor for Ren's experiment. As the wire touched the surface, a surge of electricity pulsed outward, striking the advancing soldiers. Screams filled the battlefield as they convulsed before collapsing unconscious. Standing atop insulated ceramic shards, Ren grinned, pleased with the results. The remaining soldiers, still standing, froze in terror. They had never seen anything like it. To them, this was some kind of forbidden magic. Caesar's fear quickly turned to rage. He barked at his men to continue attacking, but one soldier, horrified, hesitated and tried to warn the others. Anyone who got too close would die. Before he could finish, Caesar struck him down, killing him on the spot for disrupting morale. Glaring at the rest of his men, he issued an ultimatum: charge or face the same fate. Despite their fear, they had little choice. But even Leah was growing worried. If Ren's magic was so powerful, why hadn't it affected all of the soldiers? Ren realized the issue immediately. The battery had been drained. He had only brought one, and it had already been exhausted. Leah, sensing danger, urged him to escape. But Ren remained calm, smiling slightly. The battle was far from over. Caesar, seeing what he thought was an opportunity, commanded his men to give chase, believing that Ren had run out of tricks. The soldiers, emboldened, took a step forward, only to stop dead in their tracks as a massive pillar of light descended from the sky. The battlefield fell silent. Fear paralyzed everyone. Caesar looked up, his face paling as realization dawned on him. From above, a figure emerged. Selena, a member of the Mage Association, had arrived, and with her presence, everything had just taken a turn for the worse. As Ren faced a perilous moment on the battlefield, Selena and the mages from the Mage Association arrived just in time. With a confident smirk, she acknowledged the perfect timing, while Ren, maintaining his composure, admitted that his battery had just run out. Her curiosity piqued at the mention of his unusual energy source. But there was no time for explanations now. Caesar and his men had to be dealt with first. Selena wasted no time. She ordered the mages to assist in eliminating the rebels, and within moments, a barrage of lightning magic rained down from the sky. Thunderbolts struck the ground with deafening force, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The rebels, overwhelmed by fear and agony, begged for mercy, but the onslaught continued. Those who survived the initial attack panicked, throwing down their weapons and fleeing in all directions. Their desperate pleas for forgiveness drowned out by the chaos. But Caesar refused to go down without a fight. Bloodshot eyes filled with hatred, he roared with fury and charged straight at Ren, evading the mage's attacks with surprising agility. Leaping high into the air, he unleashed a devastating ice mountain slash, aiming to take Ren down in a single, decisive strike. Yet Ren didn't move. He remained completely still, exuding an aura of unshakable confidence. Before the blade could land, Leah intercepted the attack. Armed with only a small dagger, she effortlessly blocked Caesar's powerful strike. The sheer force of the clash shattered the ground beneath her feet, but she remained unshaken. Caesar, realizing the gap in their strength, felt a wave of dread wash over him. Before he could react, Leah closed the distance and delivered a brutal kick, sending him flying into a wooden fence. His body crashed against it, and he collapsed, unconscious. An hour later, Caesar awoke to find himself bound, sitting in front of Ren, who was calmly flipping through confiscated documents. The dim light of an oil lamp cast sharp shadows on Ren's face, giving him a chilling presence. Without looking up, Ren noted that Caesar had embezzled a significant amount as a border official, and asked when his collaboration with Eldrick had begun. The question sent a shock through Caesar's mind. Ren knew everything. Ren didn't wait for an answer. He had suspected Eldrick's betrayal long ago and had simply been waiting for the right moment to act. Thanks to Caesar, the opportunity had finally arrived. But Caesar scoffed at the idea that simple evidence of corruption would be enough to take down Eldrick. Ren shook his head, amused by the misunderstanding. The records weren't meant to be used as blackmail. They were tools to calculate the city's tax revenue. His goal wasn't just exposing corruption. It was rebuilding Iceland. Caesar found the idea laughable. Eldrick controlled the nobility, and none of them would ever follow Ren's lead. But Ren remained unfazed. He made it clear that the nobles only had two choices: follow Caesar into ruin or submit, and work for him. There was no third option. Chill ran down Caesar's spine as the realization sank in. Ren wasn't playing politics. He was purging obstacles. Later, as Ren observed the crumbling city walls, he assessed the impending threats. With autumn approaching, Grand Duke Soren would soon mobilize his forces. If war broke out, these fragile defenses wouldn't hold for long. The western border, controlled by the elves, was stable for now, provided negotiations succeeded. The east was under his sister's control, posing no immediate concern. But the north, Soren's territory, remained the biggest threat. Leah approached, presenting a report on the confiscated funds. The total embezzled amount had reached 350,000 gold coins. Ren immediately ordered the distribution of 100 gold coins to each soldier and arranged for the rest to be sent back to Iceland. With his own guards taking control of the defenses, he could finally start reinforcing the city's infrastructure. Selena, preparing to return to Iceland, expressed gratitude for Ren's assistance. But more than anything, she wanted to understand how he could use batteries without magic. Intrigued by her curiosity, Ren assured her that he'd explain everything in detail on their way back. Pleased with the answer, Selena didn't waste a second, pulling him into the carriage, eager to learn more. Just as they were about to depart, Malcolm rushed toward them, his face filled with urgency. Without hesitation, he delivered the news. Eldrick had seized control of Aislinn. Selena's eyes widened in shock, but Ren merely smiled. Eldrick had finally made his move. Selena, still processing the situation, grew anxious. With all the Mage Association's forces away, there would be no reinforcements from within the city. Suppressing the rebellion would be near impossible. But Ren remained unfazed. From the moment Eldrick had chosen to betray him, his fate had already been decided. Ren led his forces toward Iceland, the tension in the air thick as they approached the city gates. The walls loomed over them, sealed tight, with Eldrick standing at the top, an arrogant sneer stretched across his face. He showed no signs of concern at Ren's arrival, instead mocking him with feigned surprise, pretending to be amused by his presence. Ren, however, wasn't interested in pointless banter. He had a more pressing question. Why had Eldrick dared to betray his father? The question hit a nerve. Eldrick's face twisted in anger as he unleashed years of pent-up resentment. He had fought alongside Ren's father, risked his life to build this empire, yet instead of being rewarded, he had been cast aside, exiled to this desolate region with nothing to show for his loyalty. Every plea for reassignment had been ignored. Every request denied. It wasn't just betrayal, it was personal. A group of former warriors stepped forward behind Eldrick, men who had also been abandoned by the Empire. They had once served with honor, only to be discarded when their usefulness had run out. With renewed confidence, Eldrick declared that this wasn't rebellion, but justice. They weren't traitors. They were reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. Ren, unimpressed, saw through the theatrics. This wasn't about honor. It was another petty power struggle. He made his stance clear. Anyone willing to surrender would be spared. But if they remained within the city walls, they had 3 days before he broke through. Laughter erupted from the walls. The nobles jeered at his audacity, amused by the ridiculous challenge. Iceland was fortified, and taking it down in just 3 days was nothing but a foolish dream. Eldrick, emboldened by their confidence, took it further, proposing a bet. If Ren succeeded in breaching the city in 3 days, Eldrick would surrender without resistance. But if he failed, he would have to surrender himself. Ren's allies urged caution. There was no need for reckless risks. Reinforcements from the Grand Duke were already on the way. Eldrick, however, continued his taunts, goading Ren into accepting the wager. The moment Ren agreed, Eldrick triumphantly declared the bet before all present. Then, with a smirk, he casually dropped another piece of information. The Orvis Empire had already received news of his rebellion, and in 10 days, their army would arrive. The implications were clear. Ren had far bigger problems than just breaching Iceland's walls. Ren remained unfazed. He ordered his forces to set up camp outside the city, then retreated to his command tent. Selena, still uneasy, pointed out the obvious. The city's walls were strong, and their forces were limited. Breaching them in 3 days was near impossible. Others suggested retreating south and waiting for the Grand Duke's reinforcements. But Ren had no intention of waiting. His real concern was the incoming Orvis army. Time wasn't on their side. Turning to Leah, he asked about the preparations for gathering firewood and hay. Leah confirmed everything was ready, and added that a lake had been found nearby, just as he requested. Satisfied, Ren gave the next order. The mages were to use ice magic to lower the lake's temperature. Selena, puzzled, questioned the strategy. How could this possibly take down Iceland's walls? But Ren was confident. The walls wouldn't last 3 days. As dawn broke, Ren led his troops to the city gates. Instead of siege weapons, his soldiers carried bundles of firewood and hay. Eldrick, watching from the walls, found the sight baffling. When the soldiers reached the base of the walls, they dumped the firewood and retreated. Confused murmurs spread among Eldrick's ranks. His men speculated that Ren planned to set the walls on fire, but the very idea was ridiculous. Stone couldn't burn. Frustrated by their stupidity, Eldrick slapped a soldier across the face for even suggesting it. Before he could dwell on it further, another soldier interrupted, shouting in alarm. Flames had begun to spread. Eldrick scoffed at the spectacle. Did Ren truly think fire could damage stone walls? He dismissed any concerns, refusing to waste magic or arrows on something so absurd. In 3 days, he would make Ren regret this foolish stunt. For now, he simply watched, confident that victory was already his. Eldrick basked in his supposed victory, convinced that Ren's forces had wasted 2 days burning the city walls for nothing. While he indulged in celebration, a panicked subordinate rushed in, reporting that the enemy had stopped their assault. Eldrick, still filled with confidence, dismissed the concern, assuming Ren had exhausted his resources. He laughed, declaring that the foolish boy was about to surrender. Gathering his allies, he prepared to witness Ren's humiliating defeat firsthand. At the battlefield, Eldrick stood atop the city walls, arms crossed, looking down at Ren's army with smug amusement. He taunted Ren, expecting the young lord to finally admit defeat. But instead of yielding, Ren remained cold and unshaken, issuing a final warning: surrender or die. Eldrick, amused by the empty threat, reminded Ren of their wager. If the walls remained standing by sundown, Ren would be forced to submit. The nobles standing beside him joined in, jeering at the so-called genius who had backed himself into a corner. Ren remained unfazed. Taking a deep breath, he gave a simple command. At his signal, Selena, the most powerful mage under his command, floated into the sky, hands raised as the air around her crackled with energy. A deafening boom followed as lightning coiled and surged, the battlefield trembling under her power. The oppressive tension thickened as dark clouds gathered above, swirling ominously. Then, in a single motion, she released her spell. A monstrous bolt of lightning roared down from the heavens, but instead of striking Eldrick directly, it slammed into the walls beneath him. For a moment, silence followed. Eldrick, confused, let out another mocking laugh. Had Selena missed? Had all that posturing been for nothing? His confidence swelled once more, declaring the attack a pathetic joke. Then, the sky darkened further. Thunder rumbled in relentless waves, and an unnatural storm erupted. Within moments, a torrential downpour drenched the battlefield. Eldrick's smirk faltered. Something felt wrong. Before he could process the situation, Ren's forces sprang into action. Soldiers rushed toward the city walls, not with siege weapons, but with buckets filled to the brim with ice water. As the storm continued to rage, Selena, drained from her efforts, nearly collapsed, but Ren caught her before she fell. He hadn't expected her to be capable of altering the weather itself. She looked to him with concern, doubting whether his plan would work. Ren, calm as ever, assured her that everything was proceeding as intended. Leah, watching from a distance, suddenly shouted in alarm. By then, the soldiers had reached the walls, pouring the icy water over the searing hot stone. Instantly, dense clouds of steam hissed into the air. A strange sound echoed, a sharp, eerie cracking. Small fractures began to creep along the once impenetrable walls, spreading like veins of glass under pressure. Eldrick's confidence crumbled alongside the structure he had trusted. Panic seized him as he watched the cracks deepen, spreading faster than anyone could react. His nobles, equally horrified, shouted in disbelief. Then, with a deafening explosion, a massive section of the fortress wall shattered. The very ground beneath Eldrick and his forces collapsed, sending soldiers and nobles alike plummeting into the rubble. For a moment, even Ren's army stood frozen in stunned silence. No one had expected the fortress to fall apart so violently, so completely, but Ren wasted no time. He immediately ordered his forces forward. With their weapons drawn, his soldiers surged into the city. Any who surrendered would be spared. Those who resisted would be cut down without mercy. The sudden destruction shattered the morale of Eldrick's troops. Most threw down their weapons, choosing survival over futile resistance. Victory was now inevitable. Selena, still in shock, muttered in disbelief. Even with all her power, she wasn't sure she could have caused such devastation. How had Ren done it? He, on the other hand, remained composed, urging her not to overthink it. The battle was over. It was time to return home. Meanwhile, beneath the rubble, Eldrick, battered and barely conscious, clawed his way free. He had never suffered such a humiliating defeat, but his mind clung to one last, desperate hope. If he could escape and hold out until the Orvis Empire's northern army arrived, he still had a chance to survive. But as he struggled to his feet, a shadow loomed over him. 3 nobles stood before him, their expressions cold and calculating. One of them stepped forward, voice dripping with mockery. They weren't ready to die just yet. But for Eldrick, survival was no longer an option. After securing the city and crushing the last of the rebel forces, Ren led his army through the gates of Iceland. The citizens erupted into cheers, praising his victory. The seemingly impenetrable walls had crumbled in just 3 days, and miraculously, his army suffered no major casualties. The entire city marveled at his brilliance. Selena, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, flew to Ren's side, pressing him for an explanation. How had he managed to bring down the fortress so effortlessly? Ren sighed, realizing she wouldn't stop until she got an answer. He briefly explained the principle of thermal expansion, describing how extreme heat followed by rapid cooling had caused the walls to crack apart. But as soon as the words left his mouth, Selena's expression turned blank. The concept was completely foreign to her. Amused, Ren assured her he would explain in detail later, after finishing some unfinished business. Near the ruined section of the city wall, a weak voice called out for mercy. A disheveled noble lay on the ground, pleading for his life. Ren's gaze hardened as he recognized the man, one of the traitors who had sided with Eldrick. More voices chimed in, each noble scrambling to shift blame, insisting they had been deceived and had planned to turn against Eldrick all along. They begged for mercy, offering their wealth in exchange for their lives. Ren remained silent, his expression unreadable. When one of them tried to reason with him, questioning how he could expect loyalty in the future if he punished them so harshly, Ren simply laughed. People weren't loyal to leaders, they were loyal to their own interests. Without hesitation, he ordered them to be captured. Their fate would be decided later. Meanwhile, at Eldrick's mansion, panic had taken over. Eldrick, drenched in sweat, frantically begged a masked man for help. Ren had breached the city walls, and escape was their only option. The masked man, startled by the news, demanded an explanation. How could a fortress collapse so easily? Eldrick stammered, recounting how Ren had burned the walls for days and then poured cold water on them, shattering them instantly. The masked man clenched his fists in frustration, refusing to believe such a simple method could destroy a city's defenses. It had to be magic, but there was no time for debate. Eldrick, on the verge of panic, urged him to teleport them away before Ren arrived. The masked man hastily began casting a spell, unfurling a teleportation scroll. However, before he could complete the incantation, a voice interrupted. Calm, steady, and laced with amusement. Ren had arrived. Eldrick froze in terror as Ren stepped into the room. His escape had left the city defenseless, allowing Ren's forces to take control without resistance. Ren's gaze shifted toward the masked man, his tone mocking. Was he hiding a scar? Or was he simply too ugly to show his face? The masked man's composure cracked, but instead of lashing out, he scoffed, warning Ren that his victory would be short-lived. The Orvis Empire's army was already on its way. With the city walls destroyed, Ren had only hastened his own downfall. Without wasting another second, the masked man resumed his incantation. But Ren was quicker. Leah moved instantly, flicking a dagger toward him. The blade missed its mark by inches, grazing the edge of his mask. The mask shattered, revealing his face for the first time. Leah's eyes widened slightly in recognition, while the man's gaze burned with hatred. Before Ren could react, the spell activated. The masked man vanished, taking Eldrick with him. Only his voice lingered, filled with venomous promise. He would return. Leah clenched her fists, frustration evident in her stance. She had been too slow. Ren, however, remained calm. He had expected Eldrick to have an escape plan, though what troubled him now was the masked man's true identity. Leah, regaining her composure, revealed what she knew. The man was Ravenclaw Eldwin, the true head of the Eldwin family. Unlike his father, who had been executed, Raven had abandoned his clan and defected to the enemy years ago, aligning himself with Grand Duke Sorin. Ren frowned at the revelation. This was no ordinary noble. This was a man with both power and influence, and now he had a personal grudge. Selena suddenly interrupted, reporting that while the city was under control, the Orvis Empire's army was closing in. With the walls in ruins, there was no way to hold back an invasion. Ren, however, remained unfazed. He had already planned for this. Soon after, he summoned the people of Iceland to the town square. Selena assumed he intended to reassure them, to prevent panic. But as he stepped onto the platform and spoke into a sound amplification device, his words sent a wave of fear through the crowd. The Orvis Empire's army would arrive in just a few days. Gasps and murmurs filled the square, quickly escalating into terrified cries. Some people trembled, others broke into panicked shouts. Chaos spread like wildfire. Selena, utterly shocked, turned to Ren in disbelief. What was he doing? Was he trying to incite mass panic? What was his plan? The moment Ren revealed that the Orvis Empire was preparing to attack, chaos erupted throughout the square. The people of Iceland, who had just survived a rebellion, were now staring down another war. Fear spread quickly. Some citizens were already thinking about gathering their valuables and fleeing the city, while others hesitated, unwilling to abandon the security and prosperity they had gained under Ren's leadership. Selena, clearly alarmed by Ren's approach, pulled him aside. She believed he had acted recklessly. Announcing an incoming invasion like this would only drive people into panic. Ren frowned, confused by her concern. In his view, soldiers didn't need to be calm. Only their commanders did. Soldiers fought better when driven by emotions, not logic. His response only left Selena more bewildered, unable to understand his reasoning. Rather than explaining further, Ren turned toward the restless crowd, pulling out a scroll and amplifying his voice. He declared that the Orvis Empire had sent him a message, one that mocked the people of Iceland as cowards and fools, unworthy of defending their own land. According to them, Ren should abandon the city and run while he still could. A heavy silence fell over the square. Then, the tension snapped. Furious shouts erupted from the crowd, citizens raging over the insult. Every year, the Orvis Empire had exploited them, stealing their grain. This time, they would not run. They would fight. Ren smiled. He had them exactly where he wanted. He pressed further, questioning whether they truly were cowards and fools, or if they were ready to stand and defend their homeland. The people roared in response, their anger flaring into determination. They would fight to the death, 1 soldier for 1 enemy, 2 if they could manage. With their spirits ignited, Ren made his final move. If they had the courage to stand and fight, he promised he would lead them to victory. The square erupted into cheers, their fear now replaced by a desperate, unshakable resolve. Later that night, as the city prepared for war, Ren sat in his office, the candlelight flickering over the battle maps spread across his desk. Leah entered, suggesting he take a break, offering him a cup of tea. Ren smiled, accepting it, but there was no time to rest. If he didn't come up with a solution before the Orvis Empire's army arrived, Iceland would fall. Leah frowned. Hours earlier, he had stood before the people with unshakable confidence, yet now he seemed deeply concerned. Ren sighed, placing his teacup down. That confidence was a necessary illusion. Without it, the people would have fallen into chaos. If panic took hold, not only would the city be lost, but even an orderly evacuation would be impossible. Fear turned people into something worse than enemies. It made them unpredictable. Leah's worry deepened. She suggested that they flee the city quietly, taking Ren to safety before things spiraled out of control. Her concern touched him, but he shook his head. That wasn't an option. He had already ordered Malcolm and Selena to oversee the evacuation of children, the elderly, and the weak. They weren't giving up yet. Ren's eyes flickered toward a notebook on his desk, one labeled Blue-Black Magic Oil. He wasn't familiar with the substance, nor did he know if it was dangerous. He turned to Leah, handing her the book, asking if she recognized it. Leah hesitated before recalling that it was a type of flammable liquid, often used in witches' rituals. Ren's mind clicked into place. A highly flammable liquid? That sounded eerily similar to petroleum. In nature, petroleum varied in color: red, gold, black, even transparent. Its appearance determined by its resin and asphalt content. If this magic oil was anything like petroleum, then he had just found the key to turning the tide of war. Without hesitation, he ordered Leah to take him to the city's warehouse, where records indicated the substance was stored. Upon arrival, he instructed the servants to search for any barrels containing the black-green magic oil, warning them to keep it away from fire. He was certain that if it was stored in barrels, it was being preserved for some purpose. As they waited, Ren's gaze swept across the warehouse. Among the piles of gold ingots and other treasures lay the taxes Eldrick had hoarded from the people of Orvis over the years. Once this crisis was over, that fortune would be the foundation for Iceland's industrial transformation. If he could establish steam engines, the city's development would accelerate beyond anything the kingdom had ever seen. Soon the servants returned, rolling out several large barrels. Ren's heart pounded with anticipation. If these barrels contained what he suspected, then the city was saved. He rushed forward as the first barrel was pried open. Inside was exactly what he had hoped for. Iceland wouldn't fall. Not now. Not ever. Meanwhile, in the Orvis Empire's military camp, Count Castile sat inside his command tent, his expression unreadable as Eldrick and Ravenclaw Eldwin stood before him, their faces pale with anxiety. Raven spoke first, apologizing for their failure. Castile wasn't interested in excuses. He had expected incompetence, but losing an entire city in 3 days was beyond disgraceful. Eldrick, terrified, scrambled to defend himself, blaming Ren's use of forbidden magic to destroy the walls. Without it, they could have held out until Orvis's army arrived. Castile's eyes narrowed slightly. If forbidden magic had been used, then Ren's father must have sent a powerful mage to aid him. Ravenclaw Eldwin, however, reassured him that a forbidden spell couldn't be used repeatedly in a short period. Furthermore, with Iceland's walls destroyed, the city couldn't be defended for long. This was their perfect chance to attack. Castile scoffed, unimpressed. He didn't need their advice. He was not as incompetent as them. There was nothing more to discuss. Raven and Eldrick were no longer useful. They would return to Orvis and wait. Raven's expression darkened. This entire campaign had been planned together with Castile. Why was he suddenly being cut out? Castile didn't answer immediately. Instead, he retrieved a scroll and tossed it onto the table in front of Raven, his expression contemplative. Raven hesitated before picking it up, his unease growing. As he unrolled the parchment and read the contents, his entire body tensed in disbelief. The letter was a formal declaration, stating that the war had been instigated solely by Ravenlock's personal vendetta. It detailed how his actions had caused needless bloodshed and suffering. Castile, as a man of peace, sought to end the conflict and, as a demonstration of goodwill, had ordered Raven's capture. By offering Raven as a prisoner, the Orvis Empire hoped to restore peace. Raven's hands shook with rage. His voice trembled as he accused Castile of betrayal. But before he could react, Castile's expression turned cold. Without hesitation, he ordered his men to arrest Ravenclaw Eldwin. The masked man fought back furiously, roaring in defiance, but it was pointless. The soldiers seized him, dragging him out of the tent. His screams echoed through the camp, his resistance utterly powerless. Eldrick stood frozen, his body trembling. He had aligned himself with the wrong side. If he didn't escape now, he would share Raven's fate. Castile's gaze slowly shifted to him, eyes sharp and unreadable. The Count leaned back in his chair and, in a quiet but menacing tone, asked how he should deal with him. Eldrick's legs buckled. He fell to his knees, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't useless. He had a secret, one that could elevate Castile's position even higher within the Orvis Empire. At that, Castile's interest was piqued. Eldrick's life, for now, was spared. But what secret could be worth his survival? Inside the grand chamber of the Lord's mansion in Thurland, Priscilla sat reading a letter, her usual warmth fading as her expression darkened. The letter was from Leah, detailing the treachery unfolding in Iceland. The mere mention of Ren's name had filled her with nostalgia, but as she absorbed the contents, nostalgia turned to fury. Without hesitation, she ordered Gwen to summon Valus Holker immediately. Valus arrived shortly after, kneeling before her with confusion and unease. He had no idea why she was so enraged. When Priscilla accused his family of treason, his face paled. His breath caught in his throat. Desperately, he tried to refute the claim, insisting that House Holker had no reason to betray her, especially after she had helped secure their trade routes. Without a word, Priscilla flung the letter at him. The contents detailed how Eldrick had allied himself with Grand Duke Castile of the Orvis Empire, conspiring with various nobles in Aislinn, including General Caesar Holker of the Border Army. Thanks to Ren's tactics, Caesar had already been captured and executed. However, Leah warned that the rest of House Holker might also be involved, urging Priscilla to remain cautious. As Valus read, his hands trembled, cold sweat forming on his brow. He swore it was all Caesar's doing, not his family's. He had even written to Caesar personally, commanding him to follow Ren's orders. He pleaded for her to investigate the matter carefully, vowing that House Holker had no intention of betrayal. Priscilla studied him closely, scrutinizing every twitch and flinch. He didn't seem to be lying. After a tense silence, she considered the possibility that this was Caesar's treachery alone. Seeing her hesitation, Valus fell prostrate, begging for a chance to prove his family's loyalty. Desperate to secure their standing, he proposed sending his only daughter, Rosalind, to lead troops in support of Ren against the Orvis Empire's army. Priscilla weighed the risks. Rosalind was young, still in training at the Knight Academy. If anything happened to her, House Holker would lose its only heir. But Valus insisted, swearing that without Priscilla's support, his family would already be ruined. Finally, Priscilla relented, but remained cautious. Once Valus left, she ordered Gwen to have Rosalind secretly monitored. If she showed any signs of betrayal, she was to be executed on the spot. Meanwhile, outside Iceland, Eldrick and Grand Duke Castile stood atop a distant cliff overlooking the city. Eldrick confirmed that this was indeed Iceland, adding that as long as they broke through, the city would be Castile's. Gazing down at the fortress, Eldrick noticed that Ren had used emergency magic to repair the walls and even dug a trench for added defense. Castile, however, laughed at the effort. Wasting valuable mana just to reinforce walls was a foolish decision. If Ren's mages had any strength left, perhaps they could hold out, but now they had drained their reserves on pointless fortifications. Eldrick hesitated. With the walls repaired, wouldn't that make their assault more difficult? But Castile dismissed his concerns. Iceland had no natural defensive advantages, just open plains with a small river. That wouldn't stop an army, and since Ren's mages had wasted their mana, they wouldn't have the strength to resist an all-out attack. Eldrick immediately praised Castile's foresight, stroking the Grand Duke's already inflated ego. However, one of Castile's knights suggested an alternative. Instead of a direct assault, they could surround the city and starve it out. The suggestion was met with icy disapproval. Castile saw it as an insult, implying he lacked the strength to take the city by force. The knight quickly knelt in apology, clarifying that he merely wanted to minimize casualties. But Castile had no interest in caution. He intended to crush Iceland outright. He then ordered a mage to accompany him to the city, convinced that his mere presence would terrify Ren into surrendering. Inside his office, Ren was preoccupied with an unfinished task. training 5 individuals with high attributes. Half a month had passed, yet he hadn't had time to find suitable candidates. As he brainstormed solutions, Leah entered, reporting that Grand Duke Castile had arrived outside the city with a mage, demanding to meet him. Shortly after, Ren appeared at the top of the city walls. The soldiers bowed respectfully, their faces tense with concern. Above them, Castile burst into laughter, his voice booming as he prepared to make his declaration. But before he could finish, Ren cut him off with a mocking remark, loudly questioning whether this fool was truly Grand Duke Castile. Laughter rippled through the soldiers. Even Leah nodded, confirming with a straight face that, yes, this idiot was indeed Castile. The Grand Duke's expression twisted with rage. His fists clenched, veins bulging as he seethed at the disrespect. His voice trembled with fury as he reminded Ren that even his father would never have dared to address him in such a manner. But Ren remained unfazed. With an air of complete indifference, he demanded to know why Castile had come to the Western Territories. Having completely lost his composure, Castile roared that he had come to offer Ren a final chance. Surrender, and Aislinn would be spared from bloodshed. Ren's smirk widened, his voice dripping with disdain. He had an offer of his own. If Castile wished to avoid dying here, he and his army should retreat immediately. The tension in the air thickened. The battlefield was set. The only question now was who would make the first move. High above the battlefield, Castile seethed with rage at Ren's demand that he withdraw his troops. To him, this was pure arrogance. He saw Ren as nothing more than a child playing at war, completely unaware of his place. Pointing down at the city walls, Castile declared that he had brought an army of 100,000 men. If Ren wanted to avoid a gruesome death, he had only one choice: surrender immediately. Ren, however, looked completely uninterested. He barely stifled a yawn before turning to Leah, casually instructing her to silence Castile's rambling. Leah nodded, lifting the hem of her dress slightly to reveal several small daggers strapped to her legs. Without a moment's hesitation, she plucked one and sent it soaring toward Castile. The sudden attack threw the mage standing beside Castile into a panic. He surged forward, hurriedly casting a protective barrier, but Leah's precision was deadly. The small dagger tore through the barrier like paper, slicing across Castile's face. A thin line of blood trickled down his cheek. For a moment, the Grand Duke was frozen in disbelief. Then, pure hatred ignited in his eyes. He had come to intimidate Ren, yet he was leaving humiliated. His fury burned hotter than the sting on his face, and for the first time, he truly wanted Ren dead. But Ren remained unfazed. His voice was calm, almost bored. He simply warned Castile that next time, Leah wouldn't miss. Castile trembled with rage, but there was nothing he could do. His chance at asserting dominance had failed. Clenching his fists, he turned and stormed off with his men. Only when they disappeared into the distance did Ren drop his smirk, his expression turning serious. Turning to Selena, he gave the order. The Orvis Empire would attack soon. They had to be ready. Back at his command post, Castile's fury was palpable. His knights hesitated, unsure whether to address the wound on his face. When one of them finally voiced concern, Castile waved him off. The injury was nothing. It was the insult that stung. He wasted no time in issuing his next command. They would attack immediately. He wanted Ren dragged out of that city and brought to him in chains. One knight cautiously stepped forward, suggesting that the army rest first. After all, they had marched for 3 days straight, and attacking now without preparation would put them at a disadvantage. Siege weapons still needed assembling, and a proper bridge had to be built over the river. Castile's response was immediate and violent. He stormed toward the knight and delivered a vicious punch to his face. How dare he question his orders? He roared at his men, demanding to know if 3 days of marching had already exhausted them. Did they even consider themselves soldiers of the great Orvis Empire? Despite the pain, the knight forced himself to speak, insisting that even if the soldiers were willing to fight, rushing the attack without preparations was a mistake. The other knights nodded in agreement, but Castile refused to listen. He was convinced that Ren would be expecting them to wait. If they struck now, they could catch the enemy off guard. Though some of the officers recognized Castile's logic, they also knew the exhaustion of the troops couldn't be ignored. But the Grand Duke was beyond reasoning. His mind was set, and he immediately ordered the attack preparations to begin. Meanwhile, in the Orvis camp, soldiers had just finished setting up their tents, relieved that they could finally rest. After 3 days of grueling marching, exhaustion was evident in every step they took. One soldier groaned, mumbling that he was going to collapse from sheer fatigue. Another sighed, regretting ever thinking army life wouldn't be this tiring. Just then, a soldier grinned and spoke up. He had seen something interesting. The others, too tired to play guessing games, snapped at him to just say it. His grin widened. He had spotted someone slaughtering a sheep, which could only mean one thing. A proper meal was finally on the way. For a brief moment, morale lifted. After 3 hellish days, a good meal was exactly what they needed. But their hope was quickly crushed when a commander arrived, his voice stern as he barked out new orders. The soldiers were to assemble immediately. The attack on the city was about to begin. Stunned silence followed. One brave soldier hesitated before stepping forward, daring to ask if they could at least eat before battle. The commander sighed, understanding their frustration. But there was no choice. Castile had given the order. No more arguing. Everyone was to prepare for battle. With weary bodies and heavy hearts, the soldiers obeyed. Not long after, the Orvis army emerged outside Iceland, their massive numbers kicking up a thick cloud of dust. Their shouts echoed across the battlefield as they charged toward the city walls. But their first major challenge was the wide river separating them from the city. Inside the fortress, Ren stood atop the walls, watching the enemy forces closely. A soldier approached and respectfully asked if they should begin firing arrows. Ren didn't respond immediately. Instead, he continued to observe. Something was strange. The Orvis soldiers struggled to cross the rushing waters, their movements sluggish and disorganized. Something about them seemed off. After a moment of thought, he turned to his men and asked if any of them had prior experience fighting against the Orvis army. A veteran soldier immediately stepped forward, confirming he had fought them before. Ren gestured beyond the walls. "Look at them. Do they seem weak to you? Or have the people of Orvis always been this scrawny?" The soldier studied the scene carefully before answering. Based on his experience, these were likely recruits, but something else stood out. They looked starved. Ren narrowed his eyes. An army marching to war without food? That made no sense. The soldier hesitated before voicing 2 possible explanations. The first, their food supply had run low, forcing them into battle while malnourished. The second, something far more sinister. Ren prompted him to continue. The soldier took a deep breath before revealing his theory. Castile could be using these recruits as disposable pawns, sacrificing them to drain Iceland's defenses, forcing them to waste arrows and resources before the real attack even began. Hearing this, Ren's expression darkened. His fists clenched in anger. He muttered almost to himself, "And their king allows this? Aren't these soldiers also citizens of the Orvis Empire?" The soldier sighed. Few nobles cared for their people the way Ren and his father did. Most, like Castile, viewed soldiers as nothing more than tools to be thrown away. Ren remained silent, deep in thought. If Castile was willing to sacrifice his own men without a second thought, then there was no reason to show him mercy. The same soldier spoke again, pointing out that with their current supply of arrows, they could easily wipe out these recruits. He waited for Ren's command, but instead of giving the order, Ren smirked. "Don't shoot." The soldiers around him froze, staring in shock. What was Ren planning? Some soldiers swim through the waterway to reach the entrance of the castle. As some of them became wet from the swim, Rain Edgar tells Selena to order all the mages to use cold wind magic. Selena immediately flies outside the castle and begins chanting the magic, forming thick, dark clouds. Meanwhile, Castile thinks Rain is foolish. A soldier asks why, and Castile explains his plan. He had sent new recruits to launch a feint attack, hoping Rain would waste all of their arrows. Instead, Rain wasted the mages' energy to defend against the recruits. Castile believes it's only a matter of time before Rain's mages run out of power, at which point Castile will send in his magician and the army to attack. With this plan, Castile knows the city of Iceland will fall easily. The soldiers listening to Castile's strategy praise his cleverness. Castile considers imprisoning Rain because of his failed strategy. Back at the castle, the mages use wind magic on the soldiers. The soldiers are confused and frightened, with some shouting about the things they wish they could do before they die. They cling to trees, terrified. The leader of the group orders them to grab their weapons and charge. Rain and Selena watch the soldiers, and Selena asks Rain if basic wind magic will really be enough to stop them. She suggests using lightning magic. Rain refuses, stating that since ancient times, people lost their will to fight due to hunger and cold. With the wind magic, the enemy soldiers cannot stand straight, so they will not have the spirit to attack. The soldiers are cold and losing their morale. Their commanders try to encourage them to continue fighting, but the soldiers complain that their hands are frozen and they cannot lift their weapons. They are starving and have no strength left. One soldier even suggests retreating. The commander orders a soldier to report the situation to Castile, while the others are told to continue the attack. At Castile's camp, a foot soldier arrives to report. Castile lets him in. The soldier, looking injured, enters the tent, feeling bitter that the soldiers are struggling in the cold while others enjoy themselves. He reports that the attack on the front line is failing because Rain's wind magic has stopped them, and the soldiers are too weak to fight due to hunger. The soldier begs Castile to order a temporary retreat. Castile grows furious, calling the soldiers cowards. He insults them, saying they are not worthy to be noble soldiers of the Orvis Empire. The soldier protests, saying they are not afraid of death, but they have no strength due to hunger. Castile orders the soldier to be executed and decides to lead the army himself. One soldier suggests Castile doesn't need to risk his life, as the soldiers are already willing to die for him. Castile laughs, acknowledging their loyalty but stating that he wants to show the generals how brilliant he is. They arrive at the city entrance, and Castile orders the mages to use earth magic to build a bridge so their army can cross the waterway. The mages follow the order, and soon the bridge is created, though no one notices the pipes leading from the city walls into the waterway. After the bridge is finished, Castile orders the troops to charge, promising a reward to anyone who captures Rain alive. The soldiers charge toward the city. Inside the city walls, a soldier reports to Rain that Castile is preparing for a formal attack. Rain orders Leah to dump the black liquid into the waterway and block the passages on both sides. Leah commands the soldiers to use the pipes to pour the black liquid into the waterway, turning the water dark as the soldiers cross the bridge. Somewhere far away, a group of soldiers travels quickly under the command of Rosalind Holker, who rides her horse while thinking deeply about how they must move faster because nothing bad must happen to Rain. Long ago, Rosalind's father had looked at her seriously and explained that their family's future now depends on her actions alone. After hearing those heavy words, Rosalind had firmly promised her father that he could relax and trust her because she would make sure Rain stays safe. While she is lost in these thoughts, a tired soldier rides beside her and pleads with her to stop for a short rest, explaining that although both the soldiers and Rosalind are still able to move, the horses are becoming too weak after traveling without rest for 3 days straight. Without waiting too long, she asks how much longer it will take to reach Island City if they continue marching at the same pace. The soldiers quickly answer that it will take 1 more day of travel to reach the city. Wanting to understand the path more clearly, Rosalind commands the mage to show her the route while they continue riding. The mage raises a hand and forms a magical map in front of her, and Rosalind quickly studies it while feeling a growing concern that the Orvis Empire must have already broken into the city's border, which could mean that Rain is now stuck inside with nowhere to go. She also remembers what her father told her earlier, that Rain had taken an action a few days ago that caused the food supply in Island City to become dangerously low. While thinking through this problem, she suddenly pulls back the reins and stops her horse before loudly calling out to Nox, saying that she knows he is spying on her and needs him to come out so they can plan what to do next. All the soldiers start whispering to each other, clearly confused, because they do not see anyone spying on them. But the air begins to twist as Nox steps out from a space between dimensions, showing himself as Nox Old. Right away, the strange energy around him grows dark and sharp, and one soldier quickly calls for others to protect Rosalind no matter what happens. Another soldier turns to ask who this unknown mage might be, but Rosalind stops him with a strong gesture. Rosalind then looks directly at Nox, trying to confirm if he is really the person she believes he is, and Nox replies coldly that if she has something to say, she must say it quickly and clearly. Wasting no time, Rosalind explains her plan, stating that she will send a troop to block the food supplies of the Orvis Empire's army, and then she will use this weakness to surround and capture all of their forces trapped under Island City. She adds that she knows Nox was sent by Priscilla to keep watch on her, but right now, his help is needed. After hearing this, Nox explains that his mission is only to kill Rosalind if she becomes a danger to Rain, meaning he has not received any orders to help her. Rosalind smiles slightly, explaining that she already knows this, but also knows that neither she nor Nox wants any harm to come to Rain. With no better choice, Nox agrees to help and asks what she needs him to do. Rosalind then explains the full plan, saying that she will lead her army around Island City to strike from behind, and during this time, Nox must go to the top of the waterway near the border fortress and block it with magic. He must wait until her mage gives a signal, and then he must release the water all at once when the time is right. This is how Rosalind plans to flood the enemy soldiers of the Orvis Empire with the powerful stream of water. As the scene changes, the view goes to Varshala, where an elf queen with a bandaged, mummy-like appearance sits while reading a paper with quiet hope that both sides can agree and make something good from this deal. After reading the words carefully, she looks at the other elves and asks what they think. The elf queen is, in fact, the leader of them all, and one young elf named Salian quickly speaks, saying that humans are greedy and full of tricks. She continues that humans cannot be trusted, so making any kind of deal with them is not a smart idea. A different elf, who seems older and calmer, explains that the elves are too weak to feed themselves through the winter alone, and for that reason they must still buy food from humans each year, which means turning down the deal would cause bigger problems. Then the elf queen turns to Ayuria, a quiet human woman dressed like a nun, and orders her to share her thoughts because she is the only one who has met the new mayor of Island City in person. Ayuria agrees, and explains slowly that even though she thinks the mayor is full of tricks, he is still a very clever man. She adds that she still cannot believe how Rain, the new mayor, managed to pull off something so large. But he told her that not only do they have enough food for the winter, they also saved a lot of money. Castile stares at Rain and feels the fear deep in his bones, calling him a devil and wondering if Rain truly plans to burn 100,000 people alive without regret. While this horror unfolds, one soldier begs Castile to give the order to retreat, and Castile finally comes to his senses. He nods and gives the command to fall back. He climbs onto his horse and shouts for the mages to put out the flames quickly, but another soldier runs to him with dreadful news. The mages have no magic left. They used their last power to create the barrier earlier, and are now empty. Selena wipes sweat from her forehead as she watches the firestorm rage ahead, knowing that what she sees is the level of forbidden magic. Yet she is more stunned that Rain used only a few barrels of oil and no magic to create such powerful fire. All around, enemy soldiers scream and beg for help while trying to run, but most find no way to escape. Rain stands at a high place and watches everything, and deep in his heart, he decides that to prevent his people from ever falling into such a nightmare again, he must build a strong industrial system soon. As his thoughts grow heavy, pain shoots through his head, and he feels dizzy. He tells Selena to finish what remains while he moves ahead to rest. Selena nods, gives a soft smile, and then orders all the mages to wipe out the remaining soldiers of the Orvis Empire without mercy. Not long after, the fire spreads farther across the waterway, and thick smoke fills the air, making it hard to breathe. Castile leans on a soldier for support as he tries to escape, stumbling through the smoke and flames. At last, he reaches the main base and looks around, only to find it completely empty, not a single human in sight. Suddenly, he feels a strange force from above and looks to the sky. Out of nowhere, a sword crashes down beside him, sending him falling to the ground in fear, and then a woman walks toward the sword. Castile's voice shakes as he asks the woman's name. She studies him with cold eyes, guessing that he is a noble from the Orvis Empire. With a sharp gaze, she steps forward and tells him that she has been looking for him for a long time. Castile's face turns pale as he begins to tremble, asking what she wants from him. Rosalind walks closer and demands that he reveal where the rest of his forces are and whether Rain is still safe. When Castile stays silent, she begins to beat him hard, striking over and over as she commands him to answer quickly. After several more blows, Castile finally shouts that he will talk. He reveals that their army was completely destroyed by Rain's forbidden fire magic. He tries to lift his head and says he is a Grand Duke, meaning Rosalind cannot treat him like that. Hearing this, Rosalind becomes furious and curses him, calling him a liar who thinks she is a fool. She waves to her soldiers and orders them to take him away and beat him until he tells everything. Rosalind takes control of the base and stands inside the tent, her eyes carefully scanning the map laid out before her as she listens to the soldier explaining the current situation with a serious face. The soldier informs her that Castile keeps lying about being a Grand Duke, even though they have beaten him again and again. Now, his words include a wild claim that 100,000 soldiers from his side were burned alive at the border fortress of Island City, all by Rain using some kind of forbidden magic that no one thought possible. These words make Rosalind's anger boil so hot that she slams her fist on the table and quickly commands the soldier to beat Castile even harder until the truth comes out of his mouth. She also orders the whole army to rest where they are until dusk, when they will all rush toward the border fortress to reach Rain and help him. As the soldier nods and leaves the tent to carry out the orders, Rosalind begins to walk outside, thinking carefully about what she heard from Castile, especially about the earthen bridge across the waterway near the border fortress, which was left untouched when the city was attacked. It could help knights pass easily, but she understands that if her army wants to break through the fortress gates, the only way is to draw the soldiers out first and work together with the mage sent by Priscilla. She keeps thinking, wondering how to arrange her formation for the best outcome to reach Rain in time. Her thoughts shift, and she wonders if she might be able to skip the border fortress entirely and head directly into Aisland City instead. But before she can think further, her ears catch a sound, and without wasting a second, she alerts the soldiers that someone is coming to attack them. One soldier near her quickly warns her to stay safe and raises his voice to challenge the enemy, yelling for them to come forward because their entire army is fully alert and will not give them a chance to launch a surprise attack. Then, out of the trees and shadows, the enemy reveals their faces, and they are none other than the elves from the land of Varshala. Rosalind sees them clearly, and her mind races as she suspects they might be working with the Orvis Empire. She quickly spits out a strong insult, thinking the elves have betrayed Rain and taken the side of his enemies just to bring him harm. Salian hears her words and becomes furious, shouting back that what Rosalind is saying is false, because it was Rain himself who reached out first to their elf queen and asked to meet with her. Now Rosalind is twisting the truth to make them look like traitors. Rosalind starts to laugh and says she cannot believe what she's hearing because to her, all of it sounds like lies. She holds the belief that the elves are clearly standing with the Orvis Empire and are pretending to be innocent. This makes Salian's anger grow even hotter, and in her rage, she commands the elf archers to raise their bows and take aim at Rosalind. But just in time, Rosalind gives her own order, and her soldiers quickly raise their shields and form a wall around her, ready to protect her from anything that comes their way. As the fight is about to begin, the Elf Queen suddenly uses her ancient magic to form a large barrier made from space itself and tells Rosalind to stop. She then calmly explains that the reason she came is because Rain sent a letter asking to speak about a business deal. Since Rosalind is Rain's ally, they should not become enemies. If Rosalind truly sees the elves as enemies, then they will leave and meet with Rain again only after the war is over. After hearing that, Rosalind asks what proof the Queen has to support her story. Without hesitation, the Queen turns to Ayura and tells her to bring out the letter. Ayura shows the letter to Rosalind, who checks the seal in the corner and immediately recognizes it as real, because all family seals have special marks that no one can copy. Rosalind agrees to trust the elves for now, but makes it clear that she will send someone to follow them the whole time while she goes to find Rain. The Elf Queen nods in agreement and says that being careful is wise for both sides. Then Rosalind orders her soldiers to relax and continue resting, as nothing has changed in the plan they already made. Later, she walks back into the tent with one soldier and tells him to gather more troops to quietly watch the elves and report immediately if anything strange happens. After receiving the command, the soldier agrees and goes to carry it out. Meanwhile, the elves begin moving again through the land. As they travel, Salian turns to the Queen and asks why she still wants to trade with humans who clearly do not trust them at all. The Elf Queen answers in a calm voice and says that if humans had ever trusted the elves, then they would not be humans in the first place. As she looks into the distance, her eyes glow faintly with a soft pink light, while she thinks that she truly hopes Rain will not disappoint her, because the future of the elves must not be one of ruin, but of new beginnings. While Rosalind and her army march forward through the land, one scout team returns from the distance, and a soldier rushes toward Rosalind to report that the flag flying above the border fortress is not the symbol of the Orvis Empire, but still carries the mark of the Rain family. Rosalind takes in this news and quickly realizes that Castile had told the truth after all, but she does not stop and gets back on her horse immediately, because there is no time to think deeply now. She knows that whatever happens, they must get to Rain as fast as possible before it's too late. As they get closer to the fortress, Rosalind shouts an order for the soldiers to raise their flag high into the air. Because it does not matter who is guarding the fortress right now, they must let them see that Rain's allies have arrived. She then firmly commands her troops not to stop when they cross the bridge, but to ride straight toward Aisland City with full force, because they must reach the city before the night ends, no matter what stands in their way. At that moment, the scene moves to the fortress, where Rain stands outside with Leah by his side and sees nothing but the bodies of soldiers who lost their lives. His hand begins to tremble as he thinks about how powerful the enemy was, and how all those people could have been worked to death inside a cruel sweatshop if things had gone differently. Rain lowers his face and places his hands over it, showing how heavy his heart feels, as if he is mourning the soldiers who died, even though they were enemies. Seeing this, Leah believes Rain must be truly kind, because he still feels sorrow for those who tried to destroy his land. She gently tells him that he should not feel sad for people who chose to attack them, and now suffer the result of their own choices. Rain starts to reply, hoping to explain something, but a soldier suddenly comes running and informs him that a new army is approaching fast from the direction of the Orvis Empire, and the flag they carry is none other than the flag of the Second Miss. The sun rays fall softly across the beautiful city of Iceland, casting golden light over the streets and rooftops. The scene moves gently to Rain, who now sits inside a quiet room where his maid Leah stands beside him. Across from them is the Elf Queen. With focused calm, he begins to lay out his grand plan, explaining with energy in his voice how the future Iceland will shine as the pearl of the entire continent. He hopes that with her help, this dream will not just stay on paper, but rise into the skies. Rain reaches out and shows her a map, his fingers pointing at lines and marks that paint a picture of a city yet to come. He shares his belief that if she invests her trust and power into the land, then not only will she become one of the builders of this legend, but also be remembered forever as one of the founding names behind the City of Legend. While Rain speaks with a strong heart and great vision, the Elf Queen listens quietly, but her mind feels distant from it all. Although the words spark a little interest, deep inside she knows that, to elves, such plans hold little meaning. They have lived with nature for so long that the rush of cities in stone feels like a distant world not meant for them. This response stuns Rain for a moment, as he did not expect such calm rejection. As the Elf Queen tells him that elves can still live peacefully without the things he described, a heavy silence fills the space between them. Not backing down, Rain presses the idea again, his voice firm but calm. He explains that if she believes need is something natural, then her path is too narrow, because need is born from desire, and desire can be made. He shares that this is how people move forward. But the Elf Queen quietly speaks again and reveals that the needs of humans hold no weight for her kind. The things people build are not always necessary, and she has seen many great human empires fall into dust because of their endless hunger for more. Rain nods slowly, not denying her truth, and calmly agrees that human greed will one day destroy human kingdoms. But he adds that even though desire is dangerous, it is also the reason people fly and walk forward. With a spark in his eye, Rain begins giving examples. He points out that humans once wanted to fly, so they created airplanes to lift into the sky. When they dreamed of diving under the sea, they built submarines that could go deep. When their thoughts reached beyond the stars, they shaped great spacecraft to explore the unknown. Because of this, he admires human desire and tells the Elf Queen with deep belief that one day she will stand high atop a tall building in the city center and look down at the world. In that moment, he says, she will feel something deep inside, something she has never felt before. The Elf Queen feels her thoughts scatter as Rain's passion rushes over her like wind. Though she listens, she cannot understand the meaning behind his words at all. Still, she speaks again and says that Rain's belief is rare and strong. Yet he must not forget that elves are different. For thousands of years, they have not followed desire and have never been its slave. She asks with care if his words and districts will truly be enough to change that. Rain stands tall and makes a bold move, saying that if she chooses to invest, then together they will make it true and bring a new future into view. Hearing the word future, the Elf Queen suddenly remembers the vision she once saw in the magic orb, a future filled with horror, where elves fell and died at the hands of humans during a great war. She wonders quietly in her mind if, by working with Rain, she can stop that dark future from coming true. But she does not agree yet. Although she praises Rain's push and spirit, she says that these reasons alone are not enough, and she must first speak with her tribespeople before making any decision. Rain does not show disappointment, and calmly responds that he understands. He says he looks forward to her investment whenever the time comes. Then he turns and tells Leah to bring something important. Leah quickly steps forward and places a rolled paper into the elf queen's hands. When she opens it, Rain reveals that this is an invitation to the grand ceremony for the Iceland City Dam, and it comes with a VIP seat that will place her at the center of this first great step for the city's industry. The moment fades, and the scene now moves to Rosalind, who continues riding hard toward Iceland, her army trailing behind her like a shadow. Just then, a soldier arrives with a report that Rain is safe and is currently cleaning up the battlefield near the border fortress. Rosalind is struck by this because she had believed the Orvis Empire would send 100,000 troops. Now the memory of Castile's words returns to her mind, and she begins to wonder if Rain has received help from a forbidden mage. But even with this storm of thoughts, she steels herself and sharpens her will because her top duty is still to reach Rain's side as quickly as she can. At last, her group arrives at the fortress border and slows their horses. Rosalind dismounts and moves inside, where she enters a room and finds Rain sitting on a sofa, calm and unreadable. She bows deeply, introduces herself, and states that she was sent by Priscilla to support him. Then she lowers her eyes and admits that she failed to come when he needed her most, and asks for punishment. Rain confirms whether her arrival was truly ordered by his older sister. When Rosalind nods, he asks why she was coming from the direction of the Orvis Empire. She explains that her team was ordered to march 3 days ago, but she assumed Rain had left the fortress and gone to Iceland, so she changed course to block the Orvis Empire's retreat. Rain is shocked that they managed to reach Iceland so quickly from such a distant place, hundreds of kilometers away. He asks how they came if there is still no railroad. Rosalind admits she knows nothing about a railroad. Rain cuts the talk short, tells her to stop worrying, and urges her to rise, saying she has done enough. She stands with a small smile and says gently that the effort was not hard at all, since it is what the Holker family must do to keep him safe. She adds, with slight shame, that her uncle has brought trouble. Rain hears the family name and quickly asks if she is connected to Caesar. Rosalind lowers her head and reveals she is Caesar Holker's niece. Then she pleads with Rain to offer her family a second chance, and with guilt deep in her voice, begs him to punish her if needed, saying she will not complain. Rain does not answer and remains quiet. After some time, Rosalind sits alone in a big room, feeling the weight of silence, worried because Rain has not returned all day. She understands that winning Rain's trust is difficult, and because of this, she has not even been allowed to see him again. She lets out a deep sigh as she wonders where her future and her family's fate will go from here. Suddenly, Rain enters the room and speaks calmly, apologizing for making her wait. Though it makes her heart jump, he tells her to stay calm because he has only come to speak about something important. With that, she gathers her courage, believing that she will listen no matter what in order to save her family. Rain reaches out his hand and invites her to become one of his people. This simple act causes her face to blush in surprise as her heart begins to race. He steps closer to Rosalind and says that her decision-making on the battlefield leaves a strong impression on him. Despite being only 18 years old, she already possesses high attributes that make her someone valuable in his eyes. Someone with potential worth developing and nurturing. As he reflects aloud, he describes how her fearless leadership in executing a rear attack and her bravery in leading from the front have both revealed a rare kind of talent that compels him to keep an eye on her for the future. Rosalind responds immediately, humbly lowering her head and thanking him for the recognition, stating that as someone who serves under him, it is natural for her to act without hesitation. He then repeats his question, asking once more if Rosalind is truly ready to belong to him. In response, she nods while turning red in the face, revealing that if his intention is to ease his dissatisfaction by using her in any way, then she stands ready to offer everything she has without complaint. His eyes widen in surprise, realizing instantly that their thoughts have completely diverged. He raises his hand slightly and asks whether she has misunderstood the entire meaning of his words. With a calm tone, he clarifies that no thoughts of repayment or compensation have ever crossed his mind. Rosalind, still blushing, bows her head deeper and murmurs that although her heart longs to fulfill her dream of becoming a knight by his side, if her unworthy body is the only means of paying for her uncle's wrongdoing, then she is willing to accept her fate without resistance. Rain interrupts again, waving his hand firmly and insisting that she is still misunderstanding everything. He emphasizes that his intentions are not personal but professional, He does not see her as anything other than a potential subordinate. Rosalind tilts her head, not fully grasping his meaning. He then states more clearly that what he wishes to ask is whether she is willing to officially join his ranks as a knight. He also assures her that no punishment will fall upon her or her family for the actions of Caesar Holker. Then, adjusting his posture and deepening his voice with formality, he asks again if she is prepared to swear loyalty to him and serve as one of his own. Rosalind's eyes brighten as relief washes over her. She is thrilled that her fate will not be as a toy, but as a knight, which has always been her dream since she was small. She straightens her back and confirms proudly that it would be the greatest honor of her life to serve Rain as a knight and follow his lead into whatever future awaits. Later, Rain sits in his study, holding a pen with focus as he writes a letter, while Leah stands silently nearby, waiting for his next words. He mentions the current problems threatening the city of Iceland and brings up the exceptional knight who was recently sent to him. After sealing the letter, he instructs Leah to deliver it to his second sister and also include the invitation to the ceremony celebrating the completion of the dam. Leah nods and prepares to carry out the order immediately. After she leaves, Rain opens the stats window of Rosalind and starts thinking about how important it is to gather more talented individuals. He reminds himself that 5 individuals with high attributes are needed, yet so far, only 1 has appeared. Suddenly, Leah returns and breaks his thoughts by asking what should be done about Castile, who had been captured earlier by Rosalind. Rain frowns slightly, realizing he had completely forgotten about Castile's presence. When he asks where Castile is being held, Leah reports that the prisoner is currently locked in the city dungeon. Without delay, Rain decides to pay him a visit in person and heads toward the underground chambers. Inside the dim dungeon, Castile sits alone behind bars with a vacant expression, until Rain steps into view. Castile looks up and mutters that he is already finished. This confuses Rain, who reminds him that it is Castile who is behind bars, not the other way around. Castile laughs bitterly and wonders aloud whether Rain's father ever told him the truth. He then raises his voice and explains that mages who use forbidden spells are never permitted to participate in battles among ordinary people. By doing so, Rain has now broken a law that brings danger to his entire family, as all forbidden spell mages across the continent may soon come for revenge. Rain raises his brows, clearly confused, and asks if Castile is referring to Selena, but Castile quickly clarifies that Selena, while powerful, is not what he means. He is speaking of mages who possess the power to summon catastrophic destruction, something far greater than what most people have ever seen. Rain pauses, then connects the dots and realizes that Castile must be referring to the massive explosion earlier caused by the oil barrels. He responds that if that's what Castile is worried about, then there is no need, because such explosions can be created by him whenever needed. This response leaves Castile stunned, unable to believe what he just heard. He accuses Rain of speaking nonsense, since such power can only belong to a forbidden spell mage, not an ordinary human. He warns that this kind of power has the potential to ruin entire worlds, and should not be taken lightly. Rain scoffs and declares that such power no longer belongs to the past. It now rests in his hands. Rain narrows his eyes and reveals that the only reason for coming to the dungeon is to extract one truth from Castile, the identity of the true mastermind behind everything, along with their exact plans. Castile glares and denies the existence of any puppet master, stating that the warriors of the Orvis Empire have no need for reasons when charging against the so-called cowards of the Caledorial Empire. Rain chuckles, explaining that after reviewing the history of Iceland, he discovered that every spring, the Orvis soldiers crossed the borders in full force, claimed land and towns, only to retreat later without garrisoning or truly occupying what they fought for. Every fall, they withdrew with equal urgency, as if being pulled away by some silent command. This pattern appears far too deliberate to be random. He suggests that either the Orvis Empire is led by fools, or perhaps they are using the battlefield for a hidden purpose. Castile stiffens and snaps that they care little for the barren land Rain calls home, insisting they only wish to showcase their strength to the world. But Rain pushes back, suspecting that it is not about declaring anything, but instead about testing something unfamiliar and secret. When Castile stutters, unsure how to respond, Rain instructs him to take time and think about it deeply, for only then will the truth begin to form. As Rain leaves the dark dungeon, his mind races, convinced that these yearly battles are nothing more than staged performances meant to distract from a much larger conspiracy, one he now vows to uncover. To achieve this, he must strengthen Iceland's industry immediately because he refuses to be led around in the shadows any longer. 10 days later, in Sealand at the Silver Wave Harbor, Gwen arrives and hands over Rain's letter to his sister. Priscilla reads the message and learns that Rain has officially chosen Rosalind as his knight. She turns to Gwen and instructs her to pass the news to Willis, assuring him that Rain has taken a liking to his daughter and that he can rest easy. As she continues reading, her eyes land on the part about the dam's completion ceremony, which draws her curiosity. She pauses and asks Gwen if she knows what a dam even is. Gwen simply bows and admits that she does not, saying she is not smart enough to fully understand the brilliance of Rain's plans. Hearing this, Priscilla makes a quick decision to travel to Aislinn herself and see the dam with her own eyes. Gwen agrees and nods in excitement. Then Priscilla commands her to help find several girls who are close in age to Rosalind, as she wants to understand what kind of person her younger brother is drawn to. Inside the grand hall of the Orvis Empire's palace, the Emperor sits high upon his throne, frustration on his face and silence hanging heavily in the air as nobles stand before him, their shoulders tight with worry. One noble steps forward and raises his voice, stating that the capture of the Grand Duke of Castile is bound to strike fear into the hearts of their soldiers and break their fighting spirit. Another noble mumbles quietly, questioning who allowed Castile to follow his own stubborn plans and end up in such a mess. The Emperor suddenly slams his fist on the armrest with a loud thud, demanding action instead of blame. His voice echoes through the room, declaring that blaming others now is a waste of time. A cautious noble steps forward and softly suggests that the Emperor might consider sending someone to the city of Iceland to speak with the enemy and try to find peace instead of continuing the war. But before the idea settles, another voice roars across the room that the mighty Orvis Empire should never lower itself to talk with such a wild and uncivilized land. Another noble quickly agrees, adding that surrendering even a little to the Kurtaral Empire would only bring shame. Still, the first noble presses on with urgency, warning that if Castile reveals even a single secret, every plan the Empire has built over the years could be ruined beyond repair. He begs the Emperor to make the right choice before it's too late. The Emperor falls silent, seeming to think deeply, then slowly agrees that perhaps peace talks can be allowed. However, he wonders aloud if anyone in their ranks is strong and wise enough to handle such an important task. He explains that the one sent must hold a title that reflects the Empire's greatness, but also be brave and clever enough to survive the journey. One noble narrows his eyes, sensing that the Emperor's words carry a deeper meaning. That noble, Craven, begins to realize the Emperor is using this mission for more than just peace. As the Emperor turns his cold gaze on him, Craven bows respectfully and offers a name he believes fits the task: Wilvina, the only daughter of Duke Richard. The hall fills with murmurs and whispers. One noble quickly reminds the others that Duke Richard now sits in prison after angering the Emperor not long ago. Still, the Emperor keeps his eyes locked on Craven, quietly studying the man's intentions. Craven continues, listing his reasons with a steady voice. First, that Wilvina carries noble blood, which would show the Empire's sincerity. Second, that even though she has just reached adulthood, she has already proven herself clever and quick to act. And third, that this mission could allow her to repay her father's mistake with honor, and perhaps, if she succeeds, the Emperor could even forgive Duke Richard. A noble nods in agreement, saying the reasoning is sound. After thinking for a long moment, the Emperor finally agrees and places the mission in Craven's hands, commanding him with a hard voice to protect Wilvina's life no matter what. Craven bows deeply and promises with strong words that he will obey and not fail. Later, in the dark corners of the same palace, the Emperor meets with a shadowed figure kneeling on the stone floor. With a cold voice, the Emperor speaks slowly and tells the figure that Wilvina and Castile will soon return from their journey. The Emperor then calmly states that the kneeling figure already knows what must be done. Without hesitation, the figure bows lower and promises that both of them will die while still inside the hated land of Kurtaral. A cruel grin curls across the Emperor's lips as he leans back and says that if the envoy of Orvis dies at the hands of wild mobs from Kurtaral, then he will have one more reason to bring war. Far from the palace, the scene shifts to a busy city market, where vendors shout about fresh fish and ripe fruits, while families move between colorful stalls. Among them, Master Rain strolls casually as one cheerful merchant greets him with a wide smile, asking if he has come to buy something today. Rain laughs and answers that he's only here to check on the townspeople and see if there's anything they still need. The crowd around him begins thanking him loudly, some saying their lives are much better now because of him. One man, a bit too excited, shouts that he used to live worse than a beast, but now finally lives like one, causing Rain to wince and quietly wish the man would speak less if he can't choose his words right. Rain waves goodbye and asks them to return to their work, then walks away with a small smile. Somewhere else, in a quiet room, glowing status screens float in front of Rain while his eyes narrow with frustration. He studies the stats of several people, then sighs deeply, thinking that it's far too hard to find strong talents among the common people. He remembers how he has visited many parts of the city lately and still hasn't found a single person who meets the system's high standards. A soft notification appears, reminding him that he must find and raise 5 strong individuals, but so far only Rosalind has been found. Rain touches his temple in frustration and wonders if he should ask his second sister or older brother to lend him skilled people, but he quickly shakes off the thought, remembering that both of them are already buried in their own problems. He decides that he must rely only on himself. In his room, his maid Leah watches him with worried eyes and softly reminds him that he has been working too hard for the past 3 days and should rest. She also informs him that she has posted announcements throughout the city, asking people with talent to come forward. Rain smiles faintly and says that while some do show talent, they all turn out to be better suited for factory work rather than becoming soldiers. His smile fades as he confesses that the factory remains closed. The elf investors have yet to deliver results, and the dam won't be finished for at least 2 more weeks. He hugs Leah gently, sighing that it feels wrong to let mages study boring things like chemistry, yet the system's latest task leaves him no choice. He groans that the burden is far too heavy. Suddenly, shouting breaks the quiet. Outside, someone yells angrily, calling another person a liar and demanding to know how he dares show his face. A young man stands proudly, grinning, and promises that this time there will be no failure. Rain's eyes catch a new status screen, and his breath catches when he sees the stats. It reveals this boy has rare talent in both magic and strategy. At last, Rain realizes he might have found someone useful. Meanwhile, the boy named Armando continues trying to win over a grumpy shopkeeper. He pulls out a bottle with glowing green liquid and proudly claims that the potion is now perfect, able to keep any plant alive and strong for an entire year with just 1 drop. But the shopkeeper crosses his arms and scowls, reminding Armando that the last time he tried something like this, he destroyed a whole crate of apples. Armando stutters and tries to explain that his potion just doesn't work well with soft fruits like apples, but before he can finish, the shopkeeper shoves him away and shouts that he's tired of being tricked. He warns Armando never to come back. Armando tries to plead, hands out and voice shaking, but the shopkeeper won't listen. Defeated, Armando slowly walks away. From nearby, Rain watches everything unfold. He feels a strange mix of amusement and curiosity. He never expected to find someone like Armando in such a worn-down corner of the city. Leah notices a strange change in Rain's expression. Although her lips remain still, her eyes shift with quiet suspicion as she watches Armando walk away, his figure slowly disappearing into the crowd. She begins to wonder if Rain is actually showing interest in this loud, flashy alchemist who talks too much and acts too boldly. A thought that makes her heart tighten with discomfort as she silently promises herself that she will never allow someone so untrustworthy to fool Rain, no matter what it takes. At the edge of the street, Armando sits with his shoulders drooping, his energy drained and his thoughts full of bitterness. He grumbles to himself that no customers have shown real interest today, and to make it worse, his stomach growls with hunger because he hasn't eaten anything worthwhile since morning. But then, without warning, a hand reaches out toward him, and he slowly lifts his head to find Rain standing before him, calm and quiet. With a gentle motion, Rain stretches out his hand and introduces himself, his voice steady as he mentions the strange potion Armando spoke of earlier, and expresses curiosity about it, wanting to understand more. Even though he speaks without excitement, something in his tone catches Armando's attention and causes his eyes to light up brightly with sudden hope. He quickly jumps up from the ground, energy returning to his limbs, believing he has finally found someone gullible enough to be worth his time. Armando begins to speak quickly and with great enthusiasm, praising Rain for his rare insight and claiming that only someone truly special could recognize the quality of his potions. As he talks, he digs through his bag and pulls out several tiny glass vials filled with colorful liquids that swirl like magic under the sun, holding them up for Rain to admire. However, Rain doesn't even glance at the potions. Instead, he calmly asks for Armando's name and notes that he has never seen him in the city before. Armando responds with a cheerful smile, calling himself an alchemist who rarely visits this area, but promises he can make anything Rain might need, his voice full of bold claims. Leah steps closer to Rain and lowers her voice, warning him not to trust an alchemist. She explains that most of them only use clever tricks to fool people and are not to be believed. But Rain responds with a light smile and quietly remarks that time will show who is really trying to trick whom. A reply that leaves Leah confused, unable to understand what he is thinking. Rain then points at the collection of vials and asks how much they cost. Armando grins widely, picks up one glowing bottle and repeats how sharp Rain's eye is. He then begins describing the potions with dramatic flair, explaining that the yellow one makes anything shine at night, another makes the drinker move faster, and one potion, he adds with a sly grin, promises to bring a woman endless happiness for many hours. Rain's expression hardens, and his voice turns cold as he dismisses the potions as useless junk and demands to know if Armando has anything truly valuable. At those words, Armando's mood shifts quickly as anger creeps into his voice. While he can accept doubt, open mockery of his potions cuts too deeply. With a quiet growl, he mutters that if Rain wants it that way, then he will stop pretending. Leah hears the edge in his voice and sharpens her gaze, watching him like a hawk and preparing to move if he dares make a wrong move. Armando, now uncomfortable under her fierce stare, nervously comments that her expression is frightening, asking Rain if his maid always looks ready to attack someone. Rain pays no attention to the remark. Instead, he calmly studies one of the vials and explains that the glowing potion is just a weak mix of beryllium, zinc, silicates, and phosphorus, a compound that gives off little light and contains dangerous toxins. He then suggests that using a calcium-based phosphorus would be a much better choice, since it shines brighter, is much safer, and also costs less. Armando stares at him in disbelief, his eyes wide and his mouth slightly open. He insists that the formula is a tightly kept secret known only to him, and demands to know how Rain could possibly understand it. But Rain only shrugs gently and explains that calling it a secret is foolish, since the formula comes from basic chemistry that anyone with proper study can learn. He adds that if this is all Armando has to show for his skills, then alchemy must not be very deep after all. Armando shakes with rage and thrusts a finger at Rain, accusing him of stealing his research and demanding again to know where he learned such knowledge. Rain only smiles, not with pride, but with calm amusement, and tells him that he has no reason to steal from a hungry street alchemist who cannot even sell one bottle of potion. Then, suddenly turning serious, he makes an offer. If Armando swears loyalty, he will be taught real science, the truth behind alchemy, and the path to great power. Armando scoffs loudly and crosses his arms in defiance, wondering who Rain even thinks he is. In that moment, Leah steps forward with purpose and clearly states Rain's full name and rank, introducing him as Rain Edgar, second son of Grand Duke Aldonian of the Kurdaral Empire. But Armando only laughs even harder and declares that he first thought Rain was a soft little sheep, only to find out he is actually a fat fish too slow to escape. With fire in his tone, he refuses the offer, saying he would rather starve on the streets than ever serve under a noble. Rain's face grows darker as he calmly notes that Armando must have some deep hatred toward aristocrats. Armando smirks and replies with heavy sarcasm, pretending to show respect as he mentions that he would never dare offend Rain. Because after all, who could be angry with a barking dog? That comment causes Leah's anger to explode. She steps forward and demands that Armando apologize immediately or suffer the consequences. Before she can finish, Armando interrupts with a sneer, asking if she plans to attack him, mocking her for choosing violence instead of reason, and claiming that her noble pride seems to disappear the moment someone challenges her. Leah tightens her stance and prepares to strike, but before she can move, Rain calmly raises his hand and signals her to stop. He then turns to Armando and speaks with a steady voice, explaining that he does not care about the wounds nobles may have left in Armando's past. What he offers is something rare, a real chance to learn the truth behind chemistry and physics, and an opportunity to shape the future with knowledge. But if Armando would rather sit in the dirt outside Island City and waste away, then that is a decision he must live with on his own. Armando does not move an inch, standing still as if rooted by stubborn will. When he hears the offer, he sees only a well-crafted trap wrapped in fine words and noble tones, one that promises nothing real. He believes deep down that nobles chase status and gold while tossing away common people like broken tools. In that moment, he makes a vow in his heart, one that is sharp and clear. He will never serve someone like that. His rejection lands heavy and final, like a slammed door, and almost at once, the loyalty number that Rain has been watching drops hard, falling from 50 to 30, each point like a blow of failure. Rain feels the weight pressing on his chest, the heaviness of a talk gone wrong, because this is not just a failed recruitment, it is the start of something worse, the making of a possible enemy. Armando then raises a hand, pointing straight at Rain, and speaks with a voice that holds no fear and no doubt, filled instead with strong certainty. He says that not a single word from the mouth of a noble deserves trust, and that belief shines in his eyes like fire. The tension in the air turns thick and silent. But then a sudden lightness breaks it when a young girl dashes toward Armando with a smile as bright as morning. Her voice dances as she calls out, full of joy, greeting Armando like an old friend and asking when he arrived in the city. Armando blinks, caught off guard by her presence, and quickly asks her why she is here in such a dangerous place, urging her to leave without delay. Her name is Yelena. She blinks in confusion, her head tilting slightly, and asks why Armando looks so tense and worried. Armando's eyes flicker toward Rain, and he tells her that the man before them is a dangerous noble, and that even children should stay far away from people like him. But Yelena does not listen. Her face lights up again when she sees Rain clearly. Her joy grows stronger, and she calls out with excitement, saying that she knows who he is, that he is really the same Rain from the stories. Rain looks surprised and steps forward, the corner of his mouth lifting in a tired smile. He asks gently if she truly knows him. Yelena nods with pride and happiness, saying that everyone in the city knows about Rain, and her mother always says their lives got better because of him. Without Rain, her mother said, things would have been much worse. Rain then asks carefully if her father had worked on the city's dam project, and Yelena nods again, more eagerly this time. She explains that her father once struggled badly with gambling, but everything changed after Rain gave him work. Now their house is full of peace, and her mother and she often tell her father to do his best for Rain, because when he does well, their life becomes better too. The moment feels warm and full of light, but it does not last. Armando quickly steps forward and pulls Yelena behind him, his glare fierce and full of anger as he locks eyes with Rain. His voice cuts the air as he accuses Rain of using the people of the city like tools, saying that Yelena's father was treated like a slave, working long hours for barely any pay. Rain's face changes at these words. Surprise first, then irritation rising slowly beneath his calm. Rain asks what makes Armando think this way and who told him these things, wanting to understand where the anger begins. But Armando's answer comes cold and certain, built from deep distrust. He says he needs no proof because the truth lies plain before him. To him, all nobles carry the same disease of greed. He waves a hand toward Yelena's clothes, worn, thin, patched in places, and points out that if Rain's promises were real, children like her would not still live in rags. He calls Rain a hypocrite and says that nobles pretend to care but would never touch the dirt that common folk must sleep in. Leah cannot stay quiet anymore. Her voice rises in anger as she steps forward, no longer willing to listen to the insults. She says Armando has no right to speak such lies, that he cannot see what Rain has done for the city with his own hands. Through Rain's belief in the people, the island has started to grow stronger, and hope has returned. Yelena, once soft and gentle, now stands tall beside Leah. Her voice is firm as she says every word Leah spoke is true. She tells Armando not to speak unfair things about Rain because he is a kind man, a real one. She explains how he gave jobs, shelter, and food to everyone. And because of him, they no longer shiver through cold nights. They have homes now, and warm food to eat. She takes a short breath and then warns Armando with quiet strength. If he keeps saying these things about Rain, she will stop speaking to him. She reminds him that he has never lived in the city, so he cannot understand what Rain has truly done for them. Her words strike deep. Armando stands frozen, unable to answer, and for the first time, doubt flickers in his eyes. Rain sees it and steps forward with calm steps. He explains that children like Yelena still wear old clothes not because they are poor, but because the city's textile production is still growing. Food and shelter came first, but soon, light industry will bring better jobs, fine clothing, and real dignity. Armando listens, but his heart does not shift. He says he doesn't care about the light industry or what it means. What he knows, what he believes with all his being, is that nobles never care about anyone but themselves. Every kind act, he claims, is just a trick born of greed. This is the moment Yelena snaps. Her voice breaks with emotion as she cries out, saying Armando has not heard a word she said. Rain is not like the others. He is good and true. She begs him to stop saying cruel things. But Armando turns away, pain heavy in his gaze. He says softly that he no longer wants to see another noble hiding behind a mask of kindness. He warns Yelena to be careful, because danger often hides behind smiling eyes. Rain watches without a word as Armando walks away, a silent storm left behind. In his mind, a new resolve begins to form. It took so long to find someone with such raw, rare talent. He cannot let Armando disappear. Not like this. Rain takes a step forward to stop him, to speak, but his body fails him. A tremor strikes deep, his vision fades, and before a word can leave his mouth, he falls to the ground. When Rain wakes, he lies in a room he knows well, and Leah sits beside him. Her face lights up with relief as she sees his eyes open. He gives her a weak smile and tries to ease her worry, but tears fall from Leah's eyes. She scolds him, saying she warned him again and again not to push so hard, not to go out alone, not to keep trying until his body gives out. She says he never listens, always taking everything upon his own shoulders. Rain gently takes her hand and promises to change, to care for himself from now on. Then, one question presses in his heart. Had Armando already left? Leah shakes her head slowly, surprise written across her face. She says that after Rain collapsed and was brought back to the city lord's estate, something strange happened. Armando returned. He gave her a small medicine, saying it would help Rain recover, and then left as quietly as he came. Rain's eyes widen. He asks if she used the medicine, if that is why the fever vanished so fast. Leah laughs softly and shakes her head, saying she would never risk her lord's health with medicine from someone unknown, no matter how well-meaning. Instead, she called the best doctors in the city. It was their treatment that brought him back. As for the medicine, she placed it safely on his desk. Rain asks to see it. Leah offers to fetch it, urging him to stay and rest. When he finally holds it, he studies it with care. Its clear color and precise design speak of skill and deep effort. He says it should be tested by the city's doctors tomorrow. But Leah pauses. She asks carefully if Rain truly still wants to recruit Armando. She says he is proud, disrespectful to nobles, and clearly full of anger. Rain answers without delay. He says yes, because Armando is not just talented, he is the kind of genius who can build a better future for the city. With guidance, he could change everything. But Rain knows it will take more than logic or offers. That kind of deep hatred Armando holds does not come from nowhere. Something dark must hide behind it. Far away, in a quiet room filled with silence, Armando stands alone. His eyes stare at an old photo in his hand. Pain runs through them like an old wound reopened. He whispers to himself in a barely audible voice about the strange noble he met. Someone different, who, with a single glance, pierced through his entire alchemical formula. He admits confusion, unable to grasp much of what was said. Yet even Yelena, someone he trusts deeply, seems to favor the noble. His grip tightens, his voice dropping to a whisper, but he swears to his master not to worry, vowing never to fall prey to a noble's deceit. He promises to finish the research they started and vows to make the nobles pay for their crimes. Hatred blazes in his eyes. At the same moment, inside the holy temple, Rain sits in silence. Beside him, Saint Ayuria reveals the truth, explaining why Armando harbors such deep hatred for the nobles. She speaks of a woman in an old photograph, Lizelle from 15 years ago, once the most brilliant alchemist in Iceland, a genius and idealist who believed alchemy should serve all people, not just the wealthy. She adopted Armando when he was a homeless orphan, feeding him, teaching him, pouring every scrap of her precious knowledge into him. Their bond transcended that of teacher and student. Lizelle was a mother to him in every sense but blood. What she imparted extended far beyond potions and mechanics, embedding in him a moral compass that balanced invention with compassion, science with humanity. But that fragile world shattered. Lizelle's humanitarian research drew the ire of a powerful noble in the former Iceland. Unable to accept her ideals, the noble orchestrated a raid on her home, seized her work, and accused her of forbidden magic. The accusations, though false, stuck. Lizelle perished in what the public called an accident, but it was anything but. Armando, only 15, watched the one person he cherished most, ripped away by cruelty and greed. After her death, he salvaged what little remained: notes, unfinished designs, theories scrawled across torn pages, and carved a vow deep into his soul to complete her work, no matter the cost. As Saint Ayuria recounts the story, tears stream down her face, the weight of Armando's grief pressing like stone, lingering after all these years. He carries not just Lizelle's legacy, but the crushing loneliness of a boy robbed of the only family he's ever known. Rain listens quietly, brows furrowed, then breaks the silence with a flat statement, acknowledging the tragedy, but insisting it does not answer what he truly wants to know. He turns to Ayuria and demands to know if she knows where Armando is now. Ayuria flares with anger, demanding to know if Rain has any compassion at all, but Rain remains cold and unyielding, stating that compassion will not feed the hungry, rebuild shattered infrastructure, or bring progress. The world moves forward with every sunrise, and so must they. Ayuria's outrage fades to resignation as she sighs deeply, revealing that Armando likely hides at Lizelle's old house, his refuge, where all her notes and equipment remain. Satisfied, Rain stands and declares the path has just become clearer. No time to waste. They must go immediately. Just before stepping out, Rain turns back and asks if Ayuria knows what Lizelle was working on before her death. The question halts her. After a long pause, she admits it involved steam. The word strikes Rain like lightning, his eyes widening, composure cracking. He steps toward Ayuria, voice tense, and demands she repeat the word. Stammering, she confirms, though clueless about its true meaning. Rain's grip tightens on her shoulders as he stares into her eyes with urgent hope, revealing that if her memory aligns with his suspicion, they stand at the threshold of revolution, not of politics or war, but of how the world functions. He speaks of transforming industry, reshaping how people live, work, and build their future. Still dazed, Ayuria asks if it could truly be that powerful, mentioning someone once called it a toy. Rain cuts her off, ordering her to lead him to Lizelle's house immediately. She agrees, pleading only for patience. Rain dashes ahead, thoughts racing. If Lizelle indeed studied the steam engine, leaving detailed blueprints and experimental logs, this discovery could spark a new industrial age. Steam engines are ancient history in his former world, never needing deep study, but as a mechanical engineer, the concepts live in his bones, the theory, the physics, only lacking initial breakthroughs, proofs of concept, and refined designs. If those lie buried in Lizelle's notes, then everything he needs to ignite a revolution rests in his hands. Meanwhile, inside Lizelle's old home, Armando bends over a crude, worrying device. The engine on the ground hisses faintly, valves twitching as if alive. Before he can adjust it, his senses snap to alert. Someone approaches. Without hesitation, Armando flings a cloth over the device and steps outside, eyes cold, voice sharp as he demands why Rain has come. This place is off limits. Rain has no right to be here. Unfazed, Rain steps forward slowly, eyes unwavering, and asks where Lizelle's research is, declaring his intent to see her notes and understand her work. Armando's entire body tenses. He steps closer, suspicion darkening his gaze. He declares he doesn't care how Rain learned about the notes and warns that no matter what, he will never hand over Lizelle's writings. Not to him, not to any noble. Sensing tension escalate, Ayuria intervenes swiftly, assuring Armando they are not thieves and explaining that Rain only seeks to see if Lizelle's work can improve the lives of the city's people. But Armando doesn't listen. He reaches into his coat, pulling out a combat knife, pointing it directly at Rain, growling that nobles like him have no place here. This is sacred ground. Leah's hand immediately flies to the dagger hidden beneath her cloak, eyes burning with fury, one thought repeating in her mind. She will not let anyone harm Rain, not even a genius. Before she can act, Rain raises a hand and steps to her side, voice low but firm, ordering her to stay put, saying he will handle this himself. Ignoring the threat, Rain steps closer, locking eyes with Armando, words sharp and cutting. He calls him a fool, accusing him of failing Lizelle's dream by hoarding her research instead of sharing it, wasting her brilliance buried beneath fear and pride. Armando clenches his jaw, fury blazing in his eyes, demanding what right Rain has to lecture him, questioning how Rain could possibly understand Lizelle's work better than someone who dedicated his life to it. Rain's lips curl into a cold, calculating smile, proposing a wager, knowing he won't sway Armando with logic or sentiment. Rain senses that a gamble might be the only way to gain Armando's trust, or at least his cooperation. Armando scoffs, eyebrows raised in disbelief, demanding to know what kind of wager he proposes. Rain stays composed, outlining the terms calmly. If he can successfully activate Lizelle's alchemical device, Armando will serve him without complaint. But if he fails, he will leave Island City forever, never to return. Armando bursts into mocking laughter, the audacity of the challenge tickling his sense of superiority. He ridicules Rain, a pampered noble brat who can't even name half the tools in an alchemical lab. Claiming he could breathe life into Lizelle's invention is laughable. But Rain expected exactly this outburst. In the mockery, he sees the unspoken challenge accepted. Still, Armando isn't satisfied and adds a cruel twist. If Rain fails, he must not only leave, but also kneel at Lizelle's grave and offer a formal apology. Ayuria's fury rises as she protests the excessive demand, arguing that Armando's anger is unwarranted. Rain hasn't harmed him and doesn't deserve such disrespect. But Armando dismisses her concerns. For him, it doesn't matter what Rain does or doesn't do. All nobles are guilty by nature. Fixing his gaze on Rain, he demands to know if he dares accept such terms. Without a flicker of hesitation, Rain agrees, promising that if he fails, he will bow at Lizelle's grave himself. The deal sealed, he turns toward the machine hidden beneath the cloth, asking Armando to step aside so he can inspect it. Though his exterior remains calm, Rain's excitement bubbles beneath the surface. He whispers with a smirk that once he fixes the steam engine, Armando will have no choice but to fall in line. Lighting furnaces, maintaining pressure valves, he already pictures it. Armando yanks the cloth off, revealing an enormous, ungainly machine, its massive gears and pipes sprawling before them. He warns Rain not to break it. This machine is priceless. Leah and Ayuria stare wide-eyed, awed, and confused. Neither has ever seen anything like it or understood why Rain is so obsessed with this tangled mass. Alchemy has never seemed this strange. Rain runs his hands across the machine's surface, barely able to contain his joy. It's the machine he's dreamed of, a functioning or nearly functioning steam engine. After a long moment of silent admiration, he finally declares that Lizelle was truly a genius. Not just in theory, but in execution. Hearing Rain speak so highly of his mentor stirs something in Armando. His pride softens, a rare flicker of shared excitement crossing his face as he agrees, claiming Lizelle was the real thing, unlike the pretenders parading in alchemical robes without understanding a single principle. Rain then asks if Armando has been living here all this time just to get the machine working. Armando nods, explaining that Lizelle never shared instructions on how to operate it. Her notes contain theory and concepts, but no practical process. Rain suggests opening the shell to examine the inner workings, suspecting a mechanical issue, but Armando immediately objects, calling Rain crazy for wanting to dismantle it, and warning that if it can't be reassembled, everything will be ruined. Rain's expression hardens as he asks if Armando understands who he's talking to, insisting there isn't a machine in existence he can't repair. Then, holding out his hand, he demands Armando get him a screwdriver. Armando stares blankly, clueless about what a screwdriver even is. Rain sighs in disbelief, questioning how the machine was even assembled if Armando doesn't know basic tools. Unbothered, Armando explains it was assembled using magic, almost condescendingly adding that all components were forged by dwarven craftsmen commissioned by Liesel, far beyond what a pampered noble like Rain could grasp. Rain rolls his eyes and tells him to shut up, saying that if there are no screwdrivers, he'll just find another way. Turning to Leah, Rain asks for her dagger, and with the blade in hand, he begins dismantling the machine, carefully working through the strange yet familiar mechanisms. As he removes the first pieces and inspects the precision of each component, his excitement grows. He declares again that Liesel was an unparalleled genius, everything so precise, so advanced. But the deeper he probes, the more concerned he becomes. Something isn't right. Critical components are missing. He pauses, brows tightening, turning to Armando, voice sharp as he demands to know where the internal pieces are, the ones that should sit at the machine's core. Armando freezes, caught off guard by Rain's observation, struggling for a response before brushing it off, suggesting Rain is imagining things or making excuses to soften the blow of failure. But Rain isn't buying it. He points directly at the empty mounts and demands answers. It's clear the control system has been removed, something essential to the machine's operation, and he wants to know who took it. Cornered, Armando falls silent. Then, with visible pain and bitterness, admits the truth. The missing components were stolen by a noble. Rain stands stunned, demanding to know why, what that noble could want with specialized alchemical parts. Armando explains bitterly that the pieces were made of a rare, valuable mineral. Once the noble learned of it, he seized them and melted them down, not for research or development, but to create a gaudy statue of himself. Rain's eyes darken, fury simmering beneath his skin as he curses the arrogance of turning something so critical into a monument of idiocy. He demands to know who this noble is and where he can be found. Armando's expression turns grim, saying the man holds a position far above, someone Rain couldn't possibly touch. But Rain steps closer, trembling with rage, declaring that no one, no matter their status, stands beyond his reach. Rain orders Armando to speak, his voice sharp and demanding, wanting to know who dares to block his industrial revolution. Armando clenches his fists tightly, barely holding back his anger, before finally spitting out the name, Duke Eska. The moment the name leaves his mouth, Saint Ioria gasps, her face flashing with shock. Rain immediately turns to her, eyes sharp, silently asking who this Eska is. Ioria explains that Duke Eska started as a low-ranking noble from Iceland City, a boy known since childhood for his skill in alchemy. Over the years, Eska built a strong reputation through many alchemical breakthroughs, and eventually the Emperor favored him. His reward wasn't just praise, but the title of Duke and his own territory. Rain asks where this territory lies. Ioria replies it's in Grand, located to the upper right of the city of Etherin. Leah listens closely and adds that Grand answers to Grand Duke Tyrese Elroy, not the Edgar family, placing it outside Rain's influence. The pieces click in Rain's mind, his expression darkening. The name Tyrese Elroy stirs memories. His father once mentioned tense relations between their family and Elroy's. Leah confirms it. Grand Duke Elroy and Rain's father hold opposing political views and frequently clash in the imperial court. This isn't personal drama, but part of the Emperor's larger plan, a balance of power. One duke to check the other. Rain instantly understands this is not a battle he can fight directly. Not yet, not with so many forces in play. For now, Rain shifts his focus back to the one responsible for melting down Liesel's invention, Duke Eska. He swears Eska will pay for destroying those gears 100 times over. Ioria's voice trembles with worry as she warns him, questioning whether he truly plans to face Duke Eska. Rain's reply slices through the air, sharp and venomous, saying Eska won't just pay, he will suffer for what he did. 10-fold, 100-fold, there will be justice. Leah flinches at the fury boiling in Rain's voice, silent but tense, while Armando, still doubtful, challenges him, asking if he's truly serious about opposing someone so powerful. Rain stares him down with unwavering eyes, promising not only to fix the steam engine, but to make Eska understand the value of what he destroyed. His tone leaves no room for doubt or disbelief. Turning back to Armando, Rain asks if Lazelle's notes contain designs for the missing gears. Armando shakes his head. No schematics in the notes, only theory. The actual gear designs, he says with frustration, were discussed with a dwarven master craftsman who now refuses to meet with him. Rain places a firm hand on Armando's shoulder, telling him to leave that part to him. He will try. Armando warns him not to get his hopes up. The blacksmith is stubborn and has a fierce temper. Later, Rain and his group arrive at the workshop of the dwarven master, Bram. The moment they enter, Bram's scowl hits them like a hammer. He barks at them to leave, his voice rough and loud, filled with disdain. He growls that he has no time to waste on little nobles, glaring as if they insulted his forge just by walking in. Ayuria steps forward quickly, pleading with urgency. She reminds Bram of all Rain has done for Iceland, driving out corrupt nobles, making sure food reaches the poor. She begs him not to treat Rain like just another aristocrat. Bram sneers, muttering that he already knows who Rain is, a noble boy playing hero. Sure, he's done some good, killed a few bad nobles, fed some mouths. But Bram isn't impressed. Lords are supposed to do these things. Feeding the people is the bare minimum. Just like a blacksmith's job is to forge for others, and a ruler's job is to serve. No one praises a smith for doing his job. So why should Rain be different? Rain surprises Bram by agreeing. He says Bram is right. It's a lord's duty to care for the people. That's exactly why he's here today. Bram's scowl flickers for a brief moment, something shifting in his eyes. Bram then asks bluntly if Rain is here to request a forging job. Without hesitation, Rain lays it all out, explaining that he needs the gear designs Lazelle once commissioned, or better yet, for Bram to recreate the gears himself. As soon as Rain finishes, Bram's face hardens. His scowl deepens into something darker. He explodes with anger, shouting at them to leave. His voice cracks with fury as he declares he won't give them a single damn thing. Rain looks confused, sensing pain behind Bram's refusal. Bram admits those gears got Lazelle killed. He blames himself, saying if he hadn't pushed Lazelle to use dragon crystal ore for safety, she might never have drawn the attention of the noble who destroyed her. Guilt pours from every word. His hands tremble as he swears never to build anything like that again. Armando jumps on the contradiction, reminding Bram of his own words. A blacksmith's job is to forge for others. So why refuse now? Bram snaps at him to shut up, saying no means no. Even with rare dragon ore, it wouldn't work. Rain doesn't back down. He latches onto Bram's mention of dragon crystal ore, reasoning that it must be essential. Only gears forged from that special material can make Lazelle's steam engine work. Bram's eyes flicker at the thought for just a moment, but quickly hide behind another layer of scorn. Rain presses harder, his voice sharp and challenging, asking, if it's really impossible for a master blacksmith like Bram to forge functioning gears from ordinary iron, couldn't he at least try, even without the dragon ore? Provoked by Rain, Bram pointed his finger at him and shouted, "What does a brat like you even know?" Then told him to stop spouting nonsense. He gestured toward the pile of iron ore in the corner of the room and stated that, to smelt this raw iron ore into liquid form, only the ancient dragon tribe could manage it on this entire continent. Bram warned Rain not to go chasing foolish fantasies. Upon hearing this, Rain paused and seemed to be deep in thought. It was as if he had just reached some kind of conclusion. He then pointed at the forge and asked Bram if his forge was not capable of reaching the temperature needed to melt iron ore into liquid. Hearing that question, Bram shot Rain a look of utter contempt, as if he were an idiot. Bram responded that there was not a single forge on this continent that could melt iron ore into liquid. He further taunted Rain, saying that this was basic knowledge and he didn't even know it. Rain smiled and replied with a question. He asked, what if he could build a forge that could melt iron ore? Would Bram believe him? At those words, a flicker of excitement flashed through Bram's eyes, but he quickly shut them again, putting on a calm facade, pretending as though he had not heard anything remarkable. He warned Rain to stop boasting. If a forge like that could really be made, it would completely revolutionize the metallurgy of the entire empire. Rain was just a young noble's child. What gave him the right to speak so arrogantly? Having grown used to being underestimated, Rain did not take any offense to these words. He simply made a request to set this matter aside for now. What Rain wanted to know was, if he really could build a forge that can melt iron ore, would Bram be willing to agree to forge the missing parts for his steam engine? Thinking Rain could not possibly succeed, Bram nodded with confidence. If Rain could actually build a forge like that, he would definitely forge those gears for him. Upon hearing that, Rain could not help but feel a surge of joy inside. He had finally gotten Bram to agree. At that moment, Rain grew serious again. He looked toward Bram and told him to go prepare the iron ore for smelting. Bram slowly walked out the door, but not before turning back to remind Rain that if he failed, then he would get out of here and never come back. Once Bram had left, Rain remained standing with his eyes locked on the forge. He began calculating that iron melts at 1,538 degrees Celsius, and clearly, the current forge was nowhere near capable of reaching that temperature. The forge lacked a system to supply oxygen. The fuel's thermal efficiency couldn't be maximized under these conditions. With that thought, Rain picked up a large hammer and slowly walked toward the forge. Then, with powerful strikes, he brought the hammer down 4 times, creating a sizable opening in the forge's body. The sight horrified Elria, and she rushed over, grabbing Rain's hand and asking in concern what he intended to do. Behind her, Armando had completely lost his composure and shouted, calling Rain a lunatic. Armando stated that Rain had wrecked the old man's forge. How was Bram supposed to forge his parts now? However, Rain smiled and reassured them not to worry, and that he was not doing this blindly. These holes were secondary oxygen inlets he had designed himself. With them, the forge's combustion efficiency would at least double, and the temperature could reach what was needed to melt the iron ore. Elria did not understand a word of what Rain was saying. She worried whether what Rain said could really work, and wondered if such a simple modification truly would make the forge reach the required temperature to melt iron ore. Rain once again advised her not to underestimate the power of science. Once they added more fuel, this furnace would absolutely be able to melt iron ore into liquid. At that moment, Bram returned, carrying a large basin of iron ore in his hands. He announced that the ore was extremely hard. Before he could finish his sentence, Bram was completely shocked to find that his furnace now had 2 large holes in it. Furious, he shouted at Rain for daring to damage his furnace, and questioned whether Rain had any idea how much effort he had put into building this thing. Bram swore that he would risk everything to take him down. Rain calmly told him to relax, as it was not the time to be angry. He assured the old man that this furnace could now melt iron ore into liquid. Still not believing a word Rain said, Bram continued to shout, asking if he thought forging was a joke, and questioned him further. Did he actually think he knew more than Bram? And now he had put 2 holes in the forge. Wouldn't that just make the heat escape and drop the temperature even more? Not wanting to explain further, Rain simply told him to begin the smelting process, as they already had the materials and fuel. Now they just had to toss them in, and the truth would reveal itself. Trying to suppress his anger, Bram agreed to try smelting the ore as Rain had requested. He wanted to see exactly what kind of trick this young man was playing. Bram growled and stated that if this did not melt, he was going to beat Rain to a pulp. Bram then began loading the materials into the furnace and started the smelting process. Everyone in the room except for Rain watched intently, holding their breath to see if Rain's claim would come true. It didn't take long before their eyes lit up with excitement. The iron ore inside had begun to melt, and streams of hot liquid metal slowly flowed out of the furnace. Elria gasped in astonishment. It was really melting. The iron ore had actually turned to liquid. She could not believe it to be possible. Armando turned to Rain, his eyes filled with curiosity. He was eager to understand how this worked. Without rushing to explain, Rain smiled and looked at Bram and asked what he thought now. Bram looked as though he had just woken from a dream. He stammered, and a second later, his face turned from shock to exhilaration. He could not believe how the young man had done this just by making 2 holes and gotten the furnace hot enough to melt iron ore. Rain replied nonchalantly that it was all due to aerodynamic principles. If Bram was interested, he could explain it in detail later. However, for now, he wanted the old man to forge the gear that Miss Lizzle left behind. Hearing this, Bram's excitement slowly faded. He let out a long sigh and finally nodded to help Rain forge the gear, as he had won the bet after all. Bram did not forget to warn Rain that if that noble came back to cause trouble, he would not be held responsible for what happened. Rain's eyes grew cold. He responded calmly that if the noble didn't come looking for him, then he would go find him. After Rain had modified the furnace to reach the necessary temperature to melt the iron billets, he had also completed the missing component of the steam engine. With the gear finally in hand, Rain and his team hurried back to Lizzle's laboratory. Rain carefully examined the structure of the gear. He was unable to hide the excited smile on his face. At last, he held in his hands the core component needed to complete the steam engine, a monumental turning point that would open the doors to an industrial era right here in this world of magic. Standing beside him, Leah could not conceal her concern as she spoke up to ask Rain whether, while this gear looked quite sturdy, was he certain it could withstand the harsh operation of the steam engine? If it were to crack or break, it could put him in danger. From behind, Elria quickly chimed in and agreed with Leah's concern for her Lord Rain, saying that perhaps she should ask her tribe to search for some dragon crystal ore because it would be much safer that way. As an experienced industrial engineer, Rain smiled confidently, saying that there was no need for such worries, and stated that Miss Lizzle uses dragon crystal ore simply because her knowledge of industrial engineering is not deep enough. Hearing this, Armando furrowed his brow, speaking with barely restrained indignation. He requested Rain not to speak so disrespectfully of his master. Rain chuckled lightly, his sharp gaze sweeping toward Armando, and stated that he should worry about himself first, and reminded him that if he manages to repair the steam engine as per their agreement, Armando will obediently become his subordinate. Clenching his fists in frustration, Armando still responded firmly that he would keep his word as long as Rain truly completed the repairs. Armando was willing to honor every condition of their wager. At that moment, Rain slowly placed the gear into the missing section of the machine. As each mechanical component fit together perfectly, a surge of indescribable joy filled his heart. Once everything was securely in place, Rain signaled to everyone to gather around. He got everyone ready to witness a miracle. With that, he slowly pulled the lever. Just as Rain predicted, the steam engine trembled slightly before gradually settling into a steady rhythm. Thick white steam continuously hissed out from the boiler, accompanied by a roaring sound like the birth cry of a new era about to dawn. Elria cheered in delight that the machine was working and praised Rain's skills and intelligence. The machine was running, and standing amidst the dense white mist, Armando fell silent, his heart surging with intense emotion. He had never imagined that one day he would personally witness the miracle his beloved master had once poured his soul into creating come alive once again. In that instant, countless memories rushed through Armando's mind. The image of his dear teacher and their long journeys exploring new lands, the passionate lessons in metallurgy, and even the times he was scolded for his clumsy mistakes. Every moment, whether joyful or sorrowful, was a precious memory that Armando would forever cherish. The moment Lizzle completed the steam engine, though her face still showed exhaustion after days of hard work, her eyes sparkled with intense excitement. From now on, the lives of the people here would gradually become better thanks to this achievement. However, this very machine was also the reason behind the tragedy that befell the master he had so dearly admired. Years of pent-up emotions burst forth like a raging torrent, and Armando could no longer hold himself up. Collapsing to the ground, Armando cried out through sobs and stated that his master's wish and dream had finally come true. Witnessing the scene, Elria looked a little concerned, glancing toward Rain as if seeking guidance, but Rain simply shook his head and let Armando cry it out, because these tears were the emotions he had bottled up for so long. Letting it all out would help him regain his composure. 3 hours later, Lizzle's laboratory welcomed a new visitor, the blacksmith Bram. He had come out of curiosity, unable to understand how an ordinary iron component could bring the steam engine to life. After observing the machine with his own eyes, Bram looked puzzled. To him, the steam engine seemed to serve no other purpose than producing smoke. Elria agreed with his assessment, though she was somewhat excited to witness, for the first time, a machine operating entirely without magic. When it came to practical use, aside from releasing smoke, the machine did not seem to accomplish anything noteworthy. Hearing these comments, Rain could only sigh. Before he could speak to explain, Bram shook his head and added with a hint of sarcasm that this useless machine did nothing but puff out smoke and scare people. Unable to endure it any longer, Rain stepped forward slowly. His voice was calm but full of conviction. Rain explained to his friends that this machine is called a steam engine, and it is not merely a machine that emits smoke. This steam engine is the very foundation of an industrial civilization. The strange terminology left everyone staring at Rain with wide, confused eyes, as though he had just said something absurd. Gently running his hand along the machine's body, Rain continued his explanation, saying that this machine can generate powerful thrust, turning gears and driving countless other machines into motion, whether it's textile mills, transportation vehicles, or even war machines. In the future, all can be powered by it. The steam engine is the greatest invention in human history. Although she did not fully understand everything Rain had just said, Elria could still sense the greatness in the vision he painted. Bram crossed his arms, nodding in a show of partial admiration, though still harboring some doubt in his heart. Bram stated that Rain's explanation was amazing, but was this machine really as miraculous as he claimed? Rain smiled, his eyes brimming with confidence. He responded that he understood Bram's doubts, but in time, they will witness its true value for themselves. Rain further added that from this moment forward, he will lead them step by step into the world of industry, so that they may all see with their own eyes the true power of industrialization. Rain's words seemed to breathe new life into the room, stirring up lively discussions among the group. However, at that very moment, a voice suddenly called out from the distance, full of urgency, shouting for Rain. The shout came from Rosalind, who was galloping toward him on horseback. As soon as she arrived, Rosalind quickly dismounted and rushed before Rain, bowed respectfully, and stated that Lady Priscilla had just arrived in their territory. Upon hearing that his sister had come to visit, Rain immediately lit up with joy. The bond between him and Priscilla was exceptionally close. Moreover, the dam he had designed was nearing completion. This was a perfect opportunity to persuade his sister to invest further in his industrial projects. Rosalind then continued her report, her voice slightly rushed, and she added that Priscilla specifically asked her to deliver a message. She had prepared a special gift for Rain and requested that he return immediately. Rain's eyes instantly sparkled with excitement, already calculating in his mind whether the special gift was gold or banknotes. That way he could save himself from having to ask for money this time. Unable to contain his curiosity, he quickly asked Rosalind if she knew what kind of gift his sister had prepared. Rosalind's expression suddenly grew more serious, her gaze darkening slightly, and her voice slowed. She answered that the gift is a group of newly of age young women. At those words, Rain's eyes widened in shock. His face showed a mix of confusion and astonishment. He had never expected his sister to prepare such a gift. In that moment, only one thought flashed through his mind. This gift did not really suit him at all.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.